Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
How do you want to do it today? We'll take the statement live at 10:30. Shall we we'll cross live in a minute to Theo Wash. We've already had another resignation. I know this is polar opposite of what the polar opposite of what I normally do on the programme. I am quite interested in how you feel today. I genuinely, it's so bleak. Everybody's miserable. The angry, wrong people have got their way, and it's made them even angrier and wronger than they've ever been before, which is an astonishing achievement. The most despicable figures ever to disgrace the cabinet are falling like skittles. There'll be a couple more in the course of the day. Esther McVey, Work and Pension Secretary, has resigned. Career before country on an almost unbelievable scale. But the fundamental problem is the same as it has always been. And I'll tell you something else as well. I bet all the presenters at LBC, writes James, are rubbing their hands together with excitement at all this political news. I mean, I know what you mean, mate. I really do. And if you were to be judging things solely by the impact they have upon your own career, then these are the heydays. These are the glory days. Oh, I'd give it all back. I'd give it all back just to get my country back. I really would. These people who've grabbed the steering wheel and directed the vehicle that is Great Britain into swampland, brick walls, cliff edges, and they're still there. They're still being interviewed. The same tricksters, the same shysters, popping up on the same channels, in the same newspapers and the same programmes, spouting the same nonsense. And it all boils down to one thing. There is something marvellous on the horizon, but we can't tell you what it is yet. That's the crux of it all. You know, I have this odd obsession with finding that the oyster knives, the blades, the keys that allow us to unlock not the solutions to complicated problems, of course not, but the key to defining them succinctly and simply. And that is where we are now. And what I find frustrating, and you'll know if you're kind enough to listen on a regular basis, what is so frustrating is the very, very simple fact that it's been so obvious for so long. I don't think it's fair to say that it's been obvious since the referendum. I think it's important to recognise at least that things perhaps could have gone better if two things hadn't happened. If freedom of movement hadn't been weaponised, then Theresa May could have negotiated something within the parameters of freedom of movement that could have been described as in some ways preferable to what we presently had. But of course there would have been no Brexit without the weaponisation of freedom of movement, without the British people being somehow hypnotised into believing that they'd be more free if only they could surrender some more freedoms. And of course the racism and the xenophobia and the disgusting bigotry of things like that Breaking Point poster clearly played a role in getting the whole project over the line. So once that was weaponised, her hands were tied. And people like Daniel Hannan talking about Switzerland and Norway without ever acknowledging that would involve telling everybody who voted for Brexit in order to see the abolition of freedom of movement, that would involve telling them that their vote had been completely ignored. These people have taken deception and dissembling to a scale that's not normally seen during peacetime, and it's still continuing. That's the astonishing thing. No criticism of any individuals or any professionals. I watch young producers desperately hitting the phones, trying to fill gaps on programmes, trying to find someone who's prepared to come on and defend a position that nobody in government is prepared to defend, that nobody can even describe. So you end up with absolute intellectual pygmies like Andrew Bridgen appearing on programmes. And the usual suspects, the Hannans and the Johnsons and the Rees-Moggs, still doing the rounds, still selling the snake oil, still denying the reality, still yanking the chains of the United Kingdom. Esther McVey has resigned, saying the Brexit deal does not honour the result of the referendum. Seeing the words Esther McVey and honour in the same sentence, even after so many months of such nonsense, still rather raises an eyebrow, doesn't it? Quite unbelievable. At 10:09, we're still listening to the people whose lies and misunderstandings brought us to precisely this point. We're still listening to them. And if we carry on listening to them, it will get even worse. This deal that Theresa May announced yesterday, and which she will explain to the House of Commons in about 20 minutes' time, is, let me explain this really simply. It is the best, pretty much the best available option given the hand she was dealt. She was dealt that hand by Brexit. So anybody who supported Brexit cannot get behind this negotiated plan precisely because it involves admitting that they bear personal responsibility for the appalling nature of the hand she's had to play. Do you see this? This for me is the symmetry that at least allows us to understand how we've allowed ourselves to be turned into such an international laughingstock. Lots of people believed that Brexit would deliver unspecified brilliance. When Boris Johnson said the words, "We shall have our cake and eat it," surely you should have felt a little alarm bell go off in your head, given that we have all spent our entire lives employing the proverb that you can't have your cake and eat it. And Boris Johnson stands up in public with that pathetic little smirk dancing just behind his mouth all the time when he's lying. Is "we can have our cake and eat it." That was one of the moments where I thought, well, that's that then. No one's going to actually allow a senior British politician to stand up in public and essentially say black is white and white is black. Freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. You can have your cake and eat it. But we let him do it. And he'll be on manoeuvres already this morning. He'll still have his eye on the glittering prize of number 10 Downing Street. He would rather be Prime Minister of a smoking carcass of a country than never be Prime Minister in a country that flourishes. That is a simple truth now. But here's the fundamental problem. And if you read out Dominic Raab's resignation letter, then you will, I think, find this conclusion impossible to resist. They can't support May's deal because supporting May's deal involves admitting that she's made the best of a bad lot. And admitting that she's made the best of a bad lot involves acknowledging that you created the bad lot. And they still can't do that. So they still have to cling to the notion that there's something better down the road. They still have to sell the snake oil that says, I can't tell you what it is yet, but it's brilliant. Dominic Raab's resignation letter effectively says, I can't support this because there's something better called Brexit, but I can't tell you what it is. Theo Usherwood is LBC's political editor. Theo Usherwood, have you got a cold compress pressed to your forehead after chasing Ollie Robbins down the street at breakneck speed? The Usain Bolt of political journalism.
That was Trafalgar Square. I get down to the top of Whitehall by the McDonald's and there's a pub, and then Esther McVeigh has resigned, so I had to stop, set up my laptop, get the letter out. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And these are the penultimate paragraphs. It also threatens, this is Theresa May's deal, the integrity of the United Kingdom, which as a unionist is a risk I cannot be party to. The British people have always been ahead of politicians on this issue, and it will be no good trying to pretend to them that this deal honours the result of the referendum when it's obvious to everyone that it doesn't. We've gone from no deal is better than a bad deal to any deal is better than a no deal. And this is, of course, the fourth resignation of this morning. The key one happened just about 9:30. I had it confirmed. Was Nikki Da Costa. She was brought in last year as the Director of Legislative Affairs into Downing Street to get the deal, the withdrawal agreement, through Parliament. And her resignation is almost as significant as those of the cabinet ministers, because she, without that Director of Legislative Affairs to get it through Parliament, it's very difficult to see whether Downing Street can actually successfully pass the deal in the House of Commons. It's an admission, isn't it, James, that it just can't be done. And that, well, it feels like the end game.
Theresa May is unlikely to be delivering the statement at 10:30 this morning that she was preparing to deliver at 10:30 last night when she went to bed. Her words in the House of Commons imminently presumably have to reflect the developments and the events of this morning. Or not.
Absolutely. And then we have the open opposition from the Conservative benches. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn, as the leader of the opposition, will get to respond to that speech, but then we will hear from Jacob Rees-Mogg, we will hear from Boris Johnson, we will hear from Steve Baker, we will hear from David Davis, presumably as they stand up for a question and answer session in the House of Commons, which is set to last 2 to 3 hours, and they will, we presume, deliver what could be, and every the next blow could always be the fatal blow to her leadership, and the talk now about further resignations. Will Penny Mordaunt, the International Development Secretary, go? Will Andrew Leadsom, the Commons leader, go? Dominic Raab broke the dam this morning, and if Theresa May loses 4, 5, 6 cabinet ministers today, then it really does come, and it feels like already a question of her survival.
He's not going to sell many ice creams going at that speed.
No. Theresa May, it will be a short statement, 8 minutes long, like every Commons statement. And it was meant to be a sell, James. It was meant to be, when we were told last night, this was meant to be Theresa May making the case for the deal to go through Parliament. But with every resignation is another MP who goes into the lot of rebels that the
numbers
Tory
are not looking good, are they? But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Could she lose, and briefly if you would, because we've got to hit the break at some point, could she lose the vote on the Brexit deal but still win a vote of no confidence from within her own party? Like a leadership bid from within her own party? Or would it be a vote on the floor? They wouldn't have a vote on the floor of the House of Commons.
So at the moment, it's looking like the vote of no confidence is going to come first.
Right. She'll probably survive
the way
that.
the Tory MPs are ganging up. Well, it depends if she survives that. She said that she would, and Downing Street has said that she would push the numbers right to the hilt, that i.e. she will win. If she wins the vote, then she will carry on as Prime Minister. But when you get to triple figures, more than 100, it becomes incredibly difficult. If you can't rally the support, a third of your party has no confidence in you, it's very difficult to see how she can carry on.
Yes. And then what happens?
Then there's a leadership contest. We would presume there would be an application to extend Article 50, and there's a leadership contest, and then we're into the realms of a general election. Of course, Theresa May does have another option, which would be to say, I've tried my best, it's clear this is not going to go through the House of Commons, we need to have another referendum.
Of course she does. Theo Usherwood, many thanks indeed. I suspect we'll talk again in the course of this morning's programme. It seems an opportune moment to remind you that David Cameron called the Brexit referendum, of course, to unite the Conservative Party. Another one bites the dust. Suella Braverman, née Fernandez, as you may remember her being known as, she's gone as well from the Department for Exiting the European Union. If you need a little memory jog of her wisdom, here's one.
And this figure of 50 billion doesn't have any legal basis whatsoever. It's been manufactured. And it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill for £50 billion. It's part of Project Fear. Health warning, don't believe it. We pay into the European Investment Bank, and so actually we're going to get a windfall from leaving. So I think that the scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. We have a lot to gain. Our best days lie ahead, and we're going to be enjoying the freedoms and enjoying the benefits that we gain from leaving.
See that? He's still believing it. It's quite incredible. I mean, how more comprehensively could have these positions been dismantled? And still they believe it. And there she was saying that the 50 billion or the 49 billion was pie in the sky, never going to happen. I mean, it's actually unbelievable to me. You can almost make a list of these people that are resigning and file them all under the same title, of people who have already been proved wrong but refuse to admit it. And you only have to look across the Atlantic to see that there is no guarantee whatsoever that reason and rationality will prevail, that truth will overcome lies. There is no guarantee whatsoever. And if you're looking to my profession to provide it, you're looking in the wrong place, because we'll still be booking these clowns. We'll still be filling gaps in studios with them. We'll still be letting them spout the latest version of their twaddle without pointing out the last version of their twaddle has been completely unpicked. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need if you'd like to join in. Ian's in Guildford. Ian, what would you like to say?
Oh, morning, James. I hope you won't put the phone down. I'm a Conservative and I vote Conservative.
Why would I put the phone down on that?
Well, no, I'm sat at home here with a broken leg watching the TV. I'm absolutely aghast at the lack of talent of the people who are supposed to be leading my party. Now leaving in droves to fight on the outside about something they voted for on the inside. It's absolutely appalling to watch.
Well, Dominic Raab is in the remarkable position, really, and I appreciate that Ollie Robbins and Number 10 would have done a lot of the heavy lifting, but he has now resigned in protest at a document that he negotiated.
I mean, I know they were there. It drives me crazy. Boris Johnson was there. They were.
All right, now I am going to weigh in a little bit. You as a Conservative Party member and an enthusiastic Conservative Party voter, have presumably at some point in the past been a fully paid-up member of the Boris Johnson fan club.
No,
promise?
Absolutely not.
Well, that's what they're all going to say.
I went to see him speak once at dinner, and the first 30 seconds was very amusing, very funny. But then it was waffle. It was waffle. It was baseless, empty waffle. Everyone laughed. It was all claret and wine and all the rest of it, but it was hopeless. No, I am not. I am not. In fact, I've recently rejoined the Conservative Party after I left a few years, specifically so I can vote against him if he runs the leadership of the Conservative Party. That's how strongly I feel. We need some proper heads in there.
What?
I mean, both sides. I mean, by the way, Labour are as bad. That's as wishy-washy. It's just watching these talentless oafs on the TV all the time.
I don't know how you voted in the referendum, but
I voted Remain.
Oh, okay, then this is a bit moot.
Because
really.
of what's happening, actually.
That's what I was about to say, because how do you and me then, with slightly different politics, although perhaps not as different necessarily as some people might think, how do you and I reach out to people who thought it could have gone differently and voted in good faith? How do we do that? Because you and I know it could not have gone any different. Certainly from the point that the red lines met the Good Friday Agreement, this all became inevitable. We can argue a little bit more about the Article 50 and the EEA and EFTA type options, but how do we build a bridge now with people who voted in good faith for something that could never have happened? Has he gone? Oh, my fault. I'm going to try and get him back because I need his help building that bridge. Alex is in Acton. Alex, what's on your mind?
Oh, hello again, James.
Hello.
I think we should be celebrating. We should be celebrating the big Brexit farce has finally ended.
It hasn't ended. They're in retreat. Hang on a minute. I'm just going to go back briefly to Ian. How are we going to build that bridge, Ian?
Well, I hate to hear myself saying this, but I think it's going to have to go for another vote. There's no other way around it, because even if Labour get in and do their sixth test, they will fail their own sixth test.
Of course they will.
It's all ridiculous.
But another vote, I don't know that the needle's going to move much, because the alternative to changing your mind and voting to remain if you voted leave in good faith is to stand up in public, essentially, and admit that you got conned by a mewling pencil like Jacob Rees-Mogg or the usual crypto-fascists. And I don't think people can do that. And in fact, I'm not describing the people that voted for him as a mewling pencil. I'm describing him as a mewling pencil. So, I don't know, maybe we need a new vocabulary. Ian, thank you. Back to Alex. You would celebrate if you could prove it was over, but look at what they're doing. They're marshalling their forces. They're gathering over another hill. These people who have been utterly and completely exposed as either being completely ignorant of the facts or utterly dishonest, they're coming back for another tilt, Alex.
You're absolutely right, and no one knows. I've been running all the scenarios, and I can't see a scenario where Brexit comes back. You and anyone sensible and I have always known that the Northern Irish border has always been the keystone issue, not VAT, not.
I'm sorry to jump in, but I think we need to even change that language. And this is pure pot kettle black, mate. So please don't take it personally. But there's lots and lots of sensible people who didn't know that it had to end like this, because they pay their taxes and they vote in elections in expectation of a parliamentary representative who does that kind of thinking for them, who looks at that stuff on their behalf. You don't deliver your own milk. So equally, if someone stands up and they are a allegedly respectable politician and says, no, of course we can somehow come up with a solution to the Irish border, you don't have to be insensible to trust them.
I completely agree, but this is what I'm celebrating. The inevitability of that realisation is now going to come true. What's so momentous about yesterday was Theresa getting Gove and Mogg to take the knee. She broke the ERG. Their Northern Irish border proposals were
You're doing it again. You're being rational and reasonable when they're doubling down on their irrational, belief-based politics. Dominic Raab saying there is something better than this. I can't tell you what it is, but there is something better. Rees-Mogg's already said, 50 years or 100 years before we see any benefits, and they're still claiming that they can come up with something better than what she's come up with. And I still think a lot of the country will go with them, because the alternative is to admit that you have been gulled.
So if we run the Brexit Brexiteer scenario, the new leader, which personally I don't think there will be, has to go back to the EU to restart negotiations where they're not going to get anything. In doing so and asking for anything slightly harder, they immediately sort of trigger either the risk of or the actual breakup of the UK. In any scenario, they don't get DUP support because the DUP don't even support what they're doing at the moment. So they then need to trigger an election against Corbyn pre-2022, all against the backdrop of crashing out with no deal. It's not going to happen. It's over. So,
well, I don't know about celebration. I'll allow you to feel a modicum of relief, but you'll allow me not to share it. Not yet. Thank you, Alex. Because this all sounds so unkind and so uncharitable. Any optimistic reading of the situation involves people who have fallen for the lies of the Farages and the Rees-Moggs and the Johnsons and the Davises, or just the ignorance. It involves them acknowledging their own error, and we are human. I find it incredibly difficult to admit when I'm wrong. I probably would rather cling to any notion whatsoever that allows me to pretend I haven't been conned than stand up in public and admit that I have. Anne-Marie Trevelyan has now resigned as a parliamentary private secretary in the Department for Education, saying she cannot support the Brexit deal after negotiations were built on the UK trying to appease the EU. Again, the language of war, the language of enmity, the language of opposition. This is an organisation, imperfect and flawed, in which we were a valued and valuable and integral part. And as long as these clown hats continue to see it and describe it in such bellicose and negative terms, reality will never enter into their tiny little brains. I'm going to cross live to the news with the caveat that if Theresa May stands up in the House of Commons, we will obviously cross live to Theresa May standing up in the House of Commons. It's 10:30.
First, though, the Prime Minister has just got to her feet in the Commons.
It involves difficult choices for all of us. We do not agree on all of those choices, but I respect their views and I would like to thank them sincerely for all that they have done. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we agreed the provisional terms of our exit from the European Union, set out in the draft withdrawal agreement. We also agreed the broad terms of our future relationship in an outline political declaration. President Juncker has now written to the President of the European Council to recommend that decisive progress has been made in the negotiations, and a special European Council will be called for Sunday the 25th of November. This puts us close to a Brexit deal. Mr. Speaker, what we agreed yesterday was not the final deal. It is a draft treaty. It is a draft treaty that means that we will leave the EU in a smooth and orderly way on the 29th of March 2019, and which sets the framework for a future relationship that delivers in our national interest. It takes back control of our borders, laws and money. It protects jobs, security and the integrity of the United Kingdom, and it delivers in ways that many said could simply not be done. We were told that we had a binary choice between the model of Norway or the model of Canada, that we could not have a bespoke deal. But the outline political declaration sets out an arrangement that is better for our country than both of these, a more ambitious free trade agreement than the EU has with any other country. And we were told we will be treated like any other third country on security cooperation. But the outline political declaration sets out a breadth and depth of cooperation beyond anything the EU has agreed with any other country. So let me take the House through the details. First, on the withdrawal agreement, the full legal text has now been agreed in principle. It sets out the terms on which the UK will leave the EU in 134 days' time on the 29th of March 2019. We have secured the rights of the more than 3 million EU citizens living in the UK and around 1 million UK nationals living in the EU. We have agreed a time-limited implementation period that ensures businesses only have to plan for one set of changes. We have agreed protocols to ensure Gibraltar and the sovereign base areas are covered by the withdrawal agreement. And we have agreed a fair financial settlement far lower than the figures many mentioned at the start of this process. Mr. Speaker, since the start of this process, I have been committed to ensuring that our exit from the EU deals with the issue of the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. I believe this issue can best be solved through our future relationship with the European Union. But the withdrawal agreement sets out an insurance policy should that new relationship not be ready in time at the end of the implementation period. I do not pretend that this has been a comfortable process, or that either we or the EU are entirely happy with all of the arrangements that have been included within it. But of course this is the case. This is an arrangement that we have both said we never want to have to use. But while some people might pretend otherwise, there is no deal which delivers the Brexit the British people voted for, which does not involve this insurance policy. Not Canada plus plus plus, not Norway for now, not our own white paper. The EU will not negotiate any future partnership without it. As the House knows, the original proposal from the EU was not acceptable, as it would have meant creating a customs border down the Irish Sea and breaking up the integrity of our United Kingdom. So last month I set out for the House the 4 steps we needed to take. This is what we have now done, and it has seen the EU make a number of concessions towards our position. First, the EU proposal for a Northern Ireland-only customs solution has been dropped and replaced by a new UK-wide temporary customs arrangement that protects the integrity of our precious union. Second, we have created an option for a single time-limited extension of the implementation period as an alternative to bringing in the backstop. As I have said many times, I do not want to extend the implementation period, and I do not believe we will need to do so. This is about an insurance policy. But if it happens that at the end of 2020, our future relationship is not quite ready, the UK will be able to make a choice between the UK-wide temporary customs arrangement or a short extension of the implementation period. Third, the withdrawal agreement commits both parties to use best endeavours to ensure this insurance policy is never used. And in the unlikely event that it is needed, if we choose the backstop, the withdrawal agreement is explicit that it is temporary and that the Article 50 legal base cannot provide for a permanent relationship. And there is also a mechanism by which the backstop can be terminated. Finally, we have ensured full continued access for Northern Ireland's businesses to the whole of the UK internal market. Mr. Speaker, the Brexit talks are about acting in the national interest. And that means making what I believe to be the right choices, not the easy ones. I know there are some who have said I should simply rip up the UK's commitment to a backstop, but this would have been an entirely irresponsible course of action. It would have meant reneging on a promise made to the people of Northern Ireland during the referendum campaign and afterwards that under no circumstances would Brexit lead to a return to the borders of the past. And it would have made it impossible to deliver a withdrawal agreement. As Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, I have a responsibility to people in every part of our country, and I intend to honour that promise. Mr. Speaker, by resolving this issue, we are now able to move on to finalising the details of an ambitious future partnership. The outline political declaration we have agreed sets out the basis for these negotiations, and we will negotiate intensively ahead of the European Council to turn this into a full future framework. The declaration will end free movement once and for all. Instead, we will have our own new skills-based immigration system, based not on the country people come from, but on what they can contribute to the UK. The declaration agrees the creation of a free trade area for goods with zero tariffs, no fees, charges or quantitative restrictions across all goods sectors. No other major advanced economy has such an arrangement with the EU, and at the same time we will also be free to strike new trade deals with other partners around the world. We have also reached common ground on a close relationship on services and investment, including financial services, which go well beyond WTO commitments. The declaration ensures we will be leaving the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy. So we will decide how best to sustain and support our farms and our environment, and the UK will become an independent coastal state once again. We have also reached agreement on key elements of our future security partnership to keep our people safe. This includes swift and effective extradition arrangements, as well as arrangements for effective data exchange on passenger name records, DNA, fingerprints, and vehicle registration data. And we've agreed a close and flexible partnership on foreign security and defence policy. Mr. Speaker, when I first became Prime Minister in 2016, there was no ready-made blueprint for Brexit. Many people said it could simply not be done. I've never accepted that. I've been committed day and night to delivering on the result of the referendum. Ensuring the UK leaves the EU absolutely and on time. But I also said at the very start that withdrawing from EU membership after 40 years and establishing a wholly new relationship that will endure for decades to come would be complex and require hard work. I know it's been a frustrating process. It has forced us to confront some very difficult issues. But a good Brexit, a Brexit which is in the national interest, is possible. We have persevered and have made a decisive breakthrough. Once a final deal is agreed, I will bring it to Parliament, and I will ask MPs to consider the national interest and give it their backing. Voting against a deal would take us all back to square one. It would mean more uncertainty, more division, and a failure to deliver on the decision of the British people that we should leave the EU. If we get behind a deal, we can bring our country back together and seize the opportunities that lie ahead. And Mr. Speaker, the British people want us to get this done and to get on with addressing the other issues they care about. Creating more good jobs in every part of the UK, doing more to help families with the cost of living, helping our NHS to provide first-class care and our schools to give every child a great start in life, and focusing every ounce of our energy on building a brighter future for our country. So, Mr. Speaker, the choice is clear. We can choose to leave with no deal, we can risk no Brexit at all, or we can choose... Or we can choose to unite and support the best deal that can be negotiated. This deal, a deal that ends free movement, takes back control of our borders, laws and money, delivers a free trade area for goods with zero tariffs, leaves the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy, delivers an independent foreign and defence policy, while retaining the continued security cooperation to keep our people safe, maintains shared commitments to high standards, protects jobs, honours the integrity of our United Kingdom, and delivers the Brexit the British people voted for. I choose to deliver for the British people. I choose to do what is in our national interest, and I commend this statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of her statement. The withdrawal agreement and the outline political declaration represent a huge and damaging failure. After 2 years of bungled negotiations, the government has produced a botched deal that breaches the Prime Minister's own red lines and does not meet our 6 tests. The government, Mr. Speaker, is in chaos. Their deal risks leaving the country in an indefinite halfway house without a real say. When even the last Brexit secretary, who theoretically at least negotiated the deal, says, "I cannot support the proposed deal," what faith does that give anyone else in this place or in this country? The government simply cannot put to Parliament this half-baked deal that both the Brexit Secretary and his predecessor have rejected. No deal is not a real option, and the government has not seriously prepared for it. The government must publish its full legal advice and the Treasury a full economic impact assessment of the deal, and the OBR an updated economic forecast. The withdrawal agreement is a leap in the dark, an ill-defined deal by a never-defined date. there is no mention of the Prime Minister's favoured term, implementation period, anywhere in the 585 pages of this document. And no wonder. There is precious little new to implement spelt out in either the agreement or the political declaration. Article 3 of the agreement states transition can be extended to end by 31st of December 20XX. Can the Prime Minister confirm that this permits extensions to be rolled on until 2099? Can the Prime Minister confirm that if the UK government cannot agree a comprehensive future relationship by January 2021, which few believe would be possible, and the last 2 years gives us no confidence this government can, then those negotiations would have to be put on hold. Because the focus would then inevitably shift from negotiations on the future relationship to the negotiations on an extension of the transition period, including further payments to the EU. Article 132 sets out this process fairly clearly. So can the Prime Minister firstly tell the House how confident she is that a deal can be done by the end of 2020, and also confirm that if a new trade agreement is not agreed by the 31st December 2020, then Article 132 applies, paying a huge financial contribution in order to extend the transition period if we are to avoid triggering the backstop, as the Prime Minister insists is her position. On the backstop itself, should it come into force, there is no time limit or end point, and if either party requests a review, and if there is no agreement, it goes to independent arbitration. The backstop locks Britain into a deal from which it cannot leave without the agreement of the EU. In the backstop, restrictions on state aid are hardwired in with an arbitration mechanism, but no such guarantee exists for workers' rights. Can the Prime Minister also confirm that the backstop applies separate regulatory rules to Northern Ireland, creating a de facto border down the Irish Sea, as Northern Ireland will be subject to the customs union, but not the rest of the UK? This is despite the fact that the current Prime Minister said this is something, and I quote, no UK Prime Minister could ever agree to. Another of her red lines breached. In fact, the list of EU measures that continue to apply to the UK in respect of Northern Ireland runs to 68 pages of the agreement. This affects VAT declarations and rules of origin checks. And it's clear the Prime Minister's red line regarding the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice has also been torn up. By 2021, under the Prime Minister's plan, we will either be in a backstop or still in transition, where we'll continue to contribute to the EU budget and follow the rules overseen by the ECJ. It is utterly far-fetched for the Prime Minister to say this plan means we take control over our laws, money and borders. After 2 years of negotiation, all the government has really agreed is a vague 7-page outline of political declarations, which looks like a substantial dilution of the Prime Minister's previously declared negotiating priorities. There is only the scantiest mention of workers' rights, consumers' rights, or environmental protection. No determination to achieve frictionless trade, or even trade as frictionless as possible. No ambition to negotiate a new comprehensive customs union that would protect trade, jobs and industry. And so uncertainty continues for business and all those that work in those businesses. That risks decisions for investment being deferred even further, costing jobs and living standards, and many companies may decide the lack of certainty simply means they will Brexit. No clear plan to get a strong deal with the single market to ensure continued access to European markets in services, merely a vague commitment to go beyond the baseline of the World Trade Organization. Both the First Ministers of Wales and Scotland made clear to the Prime Minister that participation in a customs union to protect the economy and jobs was essential. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, there is no ambition to achieve continuation of the European-wide arrest warrant or an equivalent, and no clarity about our status with Europol, Eurojust, or even the Galileo project. And there is no clarity about any future immigration system between the UK and the EU. And following the Windrush scandal, many EU nationals here would have no confidence at all in this government to deliver a fair and efficient system. The Brexit Secretary promised a substantive document. He's obviously no longer here. So can the Prime Minister inform the House when that detailed framework agreement will be with us? Mr. Speaker, this is not the deal the country was promised, and Parliament cannot, and I believe will not, accept a false choice between this bad deal and no deal. People around the country will be feeling anxious this morning about the industries they work in, the jobs they hold, about the stability of their communities and their country. The government must now withdraw this half-baked deal, which is clear does not have the backing of the Cabinet, this Parliament, or the country as a whole.
Minister! Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, to pick up some of the points that the right honourable gentleman made. First of all, he comments on...
Theresa May responding to Jeremy Corbyn's response to Theresa May's statement this morning. We'll let Theo keep an eye on that for us and pick over the carcass of the comments shortly. What questions have you got in your mind? I think paramount in mine, and I'm very, very, very conscious, apart from the small fringe of Leave voters who I think, neatly describe as gammon, which is like the 10 to 15%, the ones who might have actually considered UKIP to be a proper political party. Apart from them, right, because there's always going to be the 10 to 15% lunatic fringe at both ends of British politics, left and right. Here's the question I'd love to hear your answers to, if you voted Leave for decent reasons. All the people who told you to jump, right? There's two constituencies here politically. There's all the people who said, don't jump. Whatever you do, don't jump. That thing you're jumping into is going to be, at the worst, it's going to be absolutely awful. At the very best, it's not going to be as nice as the place that you're jumping from. Right? Can we all agree on that? That will remain. Don't jump, because it will be, at worst, awful, and at best, bad. Worse than where we are now. Worse than the place you're jumping from. Okay? And then you had the Brexit campaigners who were saying, jump, 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 jump. It'll be brilliant. It'll be amazing. It'll be the sunny uplands. You can have your cake and eat it. Jump, jump, jump. So you jumped. Right? Because they told you to. And now, look around. Ask yourself, have they given me what they promised me would happen? Oh, well, it's not their fault. They weren't in charge. They were in charge. They could have mounted leadership bids for the Conservative Party had they been so... Oh, no, they did, didn't they? And then they pulled out when they realised they weren't going to win, like Boris Johnson. Or in disgrace and shame, like Michael Gove. Where's Gove? There's a question you need to be asking yourself today. Where is Michael Gove? But there's only two camps. It was a binary referendum, which we criticised until we've gone blue in the face. It was a binary referendum. There were only two camps. Jump or don't jump. I do not understand anymore, having followed events quite closely for the last couple of years, I do not understand anymore. And maybe you can have a crack at answering this when we get a couple of free phone lines. All the people that told us to jump, all the people that told you to jump if you voted differently from me, why are they still in the game? Why are they still allowed to perpetrate and perpetuate the nonsense that has brought us to this point? The ones that shouted jump are still in the game. But we jumped. And look where we ended up. So... if we can keep things relatively civil, I'd love to know, and you know me, it will have to be evidence-based, it'll have to be rational, it can't just involve believing. I'd love to know how you've ended up jumping because some people told you to. And then when it's turned out to be a bit rubbish, the place that you've jumped into, you've got really cross with the people who told you that it was going to be rubbish. Do you see what I mean? It's really mad, that. Here you are, standing on a precipice. Two people, one on either side, one in each ear. One saying, jump, it's going to be great. Jump, you'll fly. Jump, jump, jump. The other saying, well, look, you might be all right. You might land on the beach down there and you just have hurt your ankle a bit and then everything else, you'll just carry on as normal. Or you might be dashed to pieces on the rocks below. We don't know because we're leaping into the unknown. But we do know with relative certainty there's no way you can land somewhere better than where you took off from. And then there's the other bloke going, jump, jump. Adjusting his monocle, moving his funds to Dublin. Jump, jump. Getting passports for his German children. Jump, 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 jump. We'll be okay. Making money when the pound tanked on the night. Jump, come on, jump, jump, jump. The NHS would possibly not be able to treat your children. Jump, jump, jump. The motorways near Dover will be turned into a lorry park. Come on, jump, just jump. And then there's the other voice in the ear saying, don't jump. How have you ended up jumping and then blaming the people that told you not to jump for the fact that you've broken both your legs on landing? Why is that? Is it because you're lying now on the beach with your legs broken, bleeding and bruised and battered, but still breathing, and they're still whispering in your ears, just believe a bit more and you'll fly? Who needs legs? Brexit gives you wings. Is that what it is? And I'm trying to be gentle, I'm trying to be charitable, but is that you now? The decent Leave voter, the non-gammon Leave voter, the person with an ability to change their mind, with a facility for processing relatively complicated facts, an understanding of events. You jumped, you made a terrible mistake, you realise that now, but you can't quite admit it, and there he is now. There's Dominic Raab whispering in your ear, you don't need legs, you can fly. Just believe some more, just believe in Brexit. Believe in Brexit and it'll still be okay. That's where we are, isn't it? You jumped. We told you not to. They told you to jump. It's gone terribly, but you're going to blame the people that told you not to jump while the people who told you to jump are still there whispering in your ear. Just believe some more. It's the R. Kelly of politics. They believe they can fly. Edward is in Guildford. Sorry, Edward, I got a bit poetic. What would you like to say?
That's fine, James. Actually, I'm not in Guildford. I'm in Godalming, and the reason I'm saying this is I'm standing and sitting in the constituency of the Right Honourable Jeremy Hunt.
Okay.
And I'm going to put a £10 wager that before 10 o'clock tomorrow morning he'll be gone.
You think he'll resign from the cabinet?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know what odds you'll get on that. You'll get sevens at the moment for him to be the next Prime Minister. Second favourite after Jeremy Corbyn.
That's the reason why I think he'll go.
Okay, there's leadership, because this is a very good point that Edward makes for people who aren't political anoraks, is that somebody who woke up this morning not intending to resign will watch the other resignations occur and change their position according to how events. The best example of that is John Major having the mother of all toothaches, allegedly, during Margaret Thatcher's slow demise, waiting to see what other people did before making his move. So, yes, all right, that might not be a bad bet, Edward.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you some perspective, right? I'm a EU national and I've lived in the UK for 10 and a half years.
Yes.
When I did leave 10 and a half years ago, there were two options: to take my family to Italy, which is a country I love, or to take my family to Britain, which is also a country I love. At the time, my heart told me, go to Italy, because it's a country I really do love. But my head told me come to Britain.
Yes.
Because it would be the country that would be more reasonable, the country that would be more rational, the country that would be always more politically stable.
Well, we might be Brexiting. We haven't elected actual fascists yet.
No,
so it's, it's chicken and it's 50-50, isn't it?
Fair enough. But you see, we're actually having to rationalise this point. It seemed so obvious 10 years ago. I just can't believe what's happening. But at the same time, perhaps we shouldn't be surprised, because what's happening is inevitable. There was no way on earth that a new deal...
Well, this is the big divide, isn't it? Because I appreciate that nobody really likes and I told you so much, and I am conscious of turning into one on a fairly ugly scale, but it is inevitable. And yet, for all of the other people, for the other side, they would refuse furiously to acknowledge that it was inevitable, and will claim that it could all have gone differently if only I mean, if only we'd believed more, if only we'd got behind Britain, if only we'd stood up, and I don't know what the list is. It will be long.
Can I give you some historical context on this?
I'll give you a minute.
I don't think Brexit started 2.5 years ago.
No, of course it didn't.
I think Brexit started a long time ago.
It started 30 years ago.
I'm going to blame the current situation on two things.
Yes.
One is the education system.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And the second one is the media. This country's been intoxicated with the likes of the Mail, the Telegraph.
Were you listening yesterday when we found a list of stories even I hadn't seen before, and I'm James O'Brexit, the list of stories that had been published in British newspapers that were absolute hogwash, and yet it's like gaslighting, isn't it? It's just an incremental brainwashing of an entire nation.
And the irony of this happening 3 days after we just commemorated the end of World War I is just mind-blowing.
I don't know what they saw. What did the headbangers see when they saw Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron sort of bent heads together? What do they see if they don't see peace?
The country wants to feel proud that it helped save Europe from utter disaster. But then at the same time, 3 days later, we're talking about the French and the Belgians and the French and the Spanish like there are enemies.
I know, and that's the bottom line. That is the only divide that's left now. It's people that look upon our European neighbours as friends and allies, and people who look upon our European neighbours as somehow historical enemies, and they bang on about the Anglosphere. They told you to jump, they told you you'd fly, so you jumped. Now you're lying at the bottom of the cliff with both your legs broken, but they're resigning from the government in order to insist that you would actually be able to fly if only you could believe a bit more. And here's a real humdinger of an observation to make. I despite the fact that neither of them are yet agitating for remaining in the European Union, I think Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May are actually conducting themselves rather well over the last couple of days. Corbyn's been landing meaningful punches, and Theresa May has done, of course, what she tasked herself with doing. She's delivered the least bad Brexit. Her problem is now that, of course, no one that told you to jump can admit that this was always going to happen. And she's not blameless, Theresa May, of course. It is not just the headbangers and the half-wits who've been urging you to believe in something as if that could make it happen.
You can't negotiate the right Brexit deal for Britain if you don't believe in Britain. You can't fight for Britain if you don't have confidence in our strengths and in all that we have to offer. You can only deliver Brexit if you believe in Brexit.
You can only deliver Brexit if you believe in Brexit. If there was one phrase we could remove from the entire sorry mess of the last 2 years, it would be believe in Brexit. I don't believe in Brexit any more than I believe I can fly. Anyway, I've put together a little montage.
We will not lose influence in Europe or in the world. On the contrary, you could argue actually that we'll gain in clout.
I've never heard anyone here suggest that we wouldn't have the same sort of deal that Switzerland has or that the Channel Islands have, if you think that Switzerland's too exotic. In other words, free movement of goods and services and capital, but living under our own laws. So I don't see that there would be any impact in that sense.
We'd be better off in terms of global trade. We could do better trade deals than the European Union does on our behalf. We would not lose anything in terms of our access to European markets, because apart from anything else, the German car industry alone would have a 16 billion market put at risk.
If you vote to remain, what we will be doing is actually signing up for a riskier future.
I don't believe arrangements need to change. I think the land border we share with Ireland can be as free-flowing after a Brexit vote as it is today.
And they're still doing it. They're still telling you to jump. They're still telling you can fly. And my colleagues in the British media are still letting them. We'll catch up with Theo momentarily. Before that, Tim's in Lambeth. Tim, what's going on?
Morning, James. I'm a Remainer, married to a Brexiteer.
Gosh, how's that been?
She works in, well, it's fine because she works in statistics.
Okay.
We have many arguments and discussions, this fact, best facts. We cancel each other out, basically.
Yeah,
I wish you'd come on the show, but you're so rude to Brexiteers that I wouldn't really want you talking to her in the way that you do to others. And she came up with quite a good solution one day.
She's not allowed to make decisions for herself, Tim.
So the basis, well, I'm lucky enough where I can wait on the phone, and she can't either. But so really, the thing is, that I'm actually embarrassed today because I've got a question for you. because we actually read the same William Rees-Mogg book that someone mentioned on this show earlier, which basically
wasn't on
tells
this
you
show.
to just... No, it takes you to take a step back and look at politics as a long-term chess game. And she turned around this morning and she said to me, she said that Remainers in the EU would never allow us to leave. She said this a few years ago, and they stopped it in other countries. What do you think about your supposed democratic deficit now? We can't leave.
We can leave.
I can't
leave. This is what you need to say to her. No. We can't leave on better terms.
I couldn't come up with a reason because...
Well, I'll tell
James,
you.
And this is something really important.
No, okay, I won't know.
Can I just finish, though?
I thought you just asked me a question.
Well, no, I just need to finish this point. Because what we used to do, we used to argue over the facts, we used to cancel each other out, and what she came up with, she'd had a very good solution. She basically came up with a list of economists, historians, sociologists, whoever. They all believed in Brexit as well. Now, they can't all be stupid. They can't all be all the kind of...
Who was on the list?
That you say, I don't have the list on me, but I did check.
Right, let's just clarify what's going on here. So your wife has got brilliant Brexit arguments, but she can't ring me, and all the evidence she gives you can't remember. So the question, what was the question, Tim?
The question is, what can I... I'm embarrassed. I don't know what to tell her when
Can I tell you yet or not?
Never going to happen.
Yes, can I tell you yet or not?
Right.
No, she's not, mate. And I don't think this is... I think this is a very disingenuous call. I hate to say it, but I don't believe you. This person that doesn't want to ring me that has loads of evidence that you currently can't remember. If you're in good faith, I'll give you what you've asked for. We can leave. We are leaving. But what we can't do is leave on terms that will be superior to membership. Now, that's why I don't believe you, because that's so easy to understand that I can't believe you've spent 2.5 years somehow being in favour of remaining while not grasping the fundamental reason why it was a good idea. Have a great day. Bill's in Exmouth. Bill, what would you like to say?
Actually, James, I owe you an apology, my dear fellow. I was wrong.
Go on.
I was wrong. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that, I'm an old-fashioned git, really, I suppose.
We've spoken before.
Yeah, we've spoken before.
Yeah.
And do you know what? You are right. I was wrong. For some reason, I thought we were better off, and clearly I was wrong.
Well, don't beat yourself up, Bill, mate. Listen to all the people that told you we would be. I've spent the whole morning telling them they've been whispering in your ear, not just for 2.5 years, for 30 years.
I was wrong. I am so sorry.
Oh, Bill, mate, come on.
What have I done to my country? I'm so sorry.
Bill, there's 17.4 million people. You can't take all the blame on your own shoulders, my friend. Come on. And look at the effort. These people are billionaires. They own the Ritz, Bill. They own the Daily Telegraph. They wouldn't have spent all that money and put all that effort into trying to persuade you to act against your own interests if they didn't think it was plausible. I'm not going to let you blame yourself, Bill. All right? No. Blame them, Bill. Blame them, Bill. Do not blame yourself.
I'm sorry, James.
Don't be sorry. Be angry, all right? And if you're not angry yet, I'll get angry on your behalf. That right there. That's why I've been doing what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years. Stephen's in Leicester Square. Stephen, what would you like to say?
I would like to say you're talking to a gammon, an ex-gammon, James. Much like your last caller, what have we done? What have I done?
You're breaking my heart, you two, actually.
I had all the best intentions, and I thought, come the crunch when the final deal came, there'd be capitulation on both sides. But you know what, James? All this has done to me now is I'll never vote again because I haven't got an ounce of trust in any of them, no matter which colour they represent.
What about the people that told you that what has happened would happen? You can trust them, can't you?
You.
Well, not just me, mate. Not just me.
No, but James, when I listened to you in the morning, it chipped away at me for over a year because every morning you would come out with a point I never knew about because these points, like the immigration and the 3 months limit, no one ever got told that. If I'd have known that at the beginning, I would never have voted. It's these little facts. It's like death of 1,000 cuts, James, Eventually, you're going to die. And I've died.
But don't, please.
Now, that's it.
All right.
And that's how it's left,
I don't know what to say, Stephen. I'm a bit discombobulated, to be honest with you. But can you promise me you won't get cross with yourself? Get cross with
absolutely
Good,
not.
because Bill worried me then. I didn't like listening to Bill doing that. There's no pleasure in this. No pleasure at all.
I feel like an idiot, and that's it. But I am angry. I'm not angry with myself. No. I'm angry with the people that never, ever, or intentionally refuse to withhold the minute bits of detail that were the most important.
Yes. Well, we'll continue making that list, although, of course, we've heard from some of them on recorded tape already today. Oh, boys, come on. Theo Ushwood is here, LBC's political editor. Anyone else gone yet?
No, but Michael Gove has gone missing. He wasn't on the front bench, the Environment Secretary, and he's turned into something of a shop steward for the Cabinet, somebody who Brexiteers and Remainers within the Cabinet can go to for council, somebody who leads opinions.
Theo, he is supposed to be at a farming conference in Yorkshire.
But he hasn't turned up.
He hasn't turned up. I don't know if he's due there till 2 o'clock.
I think the statement in the Commons beats the farming conference.
Probably, yes, probably. So he's on manoeuvres.
He's on manoeuvres. Gavin Williamson, the Defence Secretary, he wasn't there sitting by Theresa May's side, and Sajid Javid, of course, the Home Secretary, and Penny Mordaunt. They all looked decidedly awkward. So at the moment, we're all on Gove watch. Meanwhile, the debate continues in the House of Commons. First up, none other than Ken Clarke.
So will she undertake that we will not change the present basis of that, which is the single market and the customs union, until we know what we're changing to? And until we're satisfied that any change will retain those benefits and keep completely open from any delays and costs caused by regulatory differences or anything else which will be created by moving away from where we are now and threaten the economic future of this country very considerably if we just decide unilaterally to walk out, as some of my colleagues seem prepared to recommend.
Ken Clarke there. The answer, by the way, was a roundabout no. The Prime Minister wasn't going to undertake that. We don't still have the final plan, and it's important to recognise, I think, that this is very limited, this document provided by Theresa May. It doesn't set out the future trading relationship. It merely tries to bridge the gap between that future trading relationship with the European Union in terms of a temporary customs union as being the fallback. Theresa May was then asked by Ian Blackford, and I think there's a feeling from the Scottish Nat's point of view, because he's the leader of the SNP in Westminster, is that Brexit doesn't simply stop here. It doesn't simply stop with when we leave the European Union, because it raises questions about where Scotland fits into it. If there's going to be a different deal for Northern Ireland, well, why can't there be one for Scotland as well, where Scotland remains within the single market? And that, of course, raises the possibility of a second independence referendum.
100 mentions of Northern Ireland, mentions of Gibraltar, of Cyprus, but no reference to Scotland. Mr. Speaker, differentiated deals for Northern Ireland means Scotland can have its own differentiated deal. If Northern Ireland can stay in the single market, why not Scotland, Prime Minister?
11:15 is the time. Thank you, Theo Ushwood. There is, of course, a threat to the union here. A few people picking up on a couple of the calls that we've just taken. I'll say it again, I get no pleasure whatsoever from listening to a man like Bill beating himself up for believing the lies of these people who've brought our country to its knees. Or Stephen, angry about being lied to. Lauren writes, I'm crying my eyes out after Bill's call. I'm lost for words at how this is turning out. And she adds kindly exactly how you predicted. It's heartwarming to hear your callers actually admit that they were wrong. That's the type of humility and reflection that's desperately lacking among Trump supporters. Ben writes, is anyone listening to this craziness on at Mr. James O.B. today? Self-confessed gammons crying into the telephone, bawling. I don't like bawling, Ben, all right? What have I done? You couldn't make this up. Oh, James, this is heartbreaking, says Tom in France. I was always Remain. It looks like the penny is finally dropping. People tend to get angry when they admit that they've been conned. I feel so saddened, says Nick, by the last two callers. What have we done? Malgosia is a little bit profane. I can't read out the first 4 words of her tweet. A Leave voter has just broken down in actual tears, apologising for his vote, and now there's a self-confessed I was a gammon until now apologising to James. Guys, it had to happen. But they're still telling you can fly. They're still resigning in order to retain the right to tell you can fly. Don't get cross with yourself. Get cross with them. They told you to jump, so you jumped. That's fine. They made it sound so beautiful. They told you that you'd fly. But you didn't. You crashed to the ground and broke both your legs. So what are they doing now? They're telling you could still fly if you just believed a bit more. And all the people who told you not to jump, your broken legs are their fault. I know I'm over fond of analogies, but this is a pretty good one, isn't it? But don't beat yourself up for jumping. Blame the people who told you to. Liam is in St Albans. Liam, what would you like to say?
Sorry and thank you. Basically, it's one of those things where I thought I was making an informed decision, and when you look back on it, and I hate to plug your own book, but reading book as well, it's one of those things where it is just the fundamental thing of how to puncture arguments, yes, or not thinking straight, yes, but just putting out this drivel. And there's this thing of, yes, I see what you're saying about the jump and broken leg analogy. It's this thing of, the reason I'm angry as well at the people who said don't jump is because they kind of weren't saying it loud enough at the time.
That's a good criticism, actually. But I don't forget Project Fear. Every time they said something loud, they got shouted down by the jumpers, by saying Project Fear. So they did say, everyone from the Governor of the Bank of England down did say some pretty hefty stuff, but it all got turned into Project Fear, mate.
But then the Bank of England also called Nick Clegg and told him to take a seat with David Cameron. Mm-hmm. There's certain things that I didn't always agree with that was coming out of the Bank of England. What I was trusting very wrongly was our politicians. Yes. It got to a point where when I was hearing people say, do a flip, yeah, it's going to be a great jump, you're going to love it. Yeah. And then I've learned halfway down that ball that actually the people saying that, they were shouting louder than the people that were saying don't. And you can't hear that. You can't see the wood for the trees.
I hear you completely, and I like your contribution because I've been really quite upset by Bill's call. I know a lot of people have, because I do not want that decent British man to be blaming himself for doing something bad for Britain. Can we make it so? If I might ask other people who, and I'm not just going to take uninterrupted confessions on the programme, I think, although it might be slightly reassuring, it won't be great radio. But if you had to pick an individual who was most seductive in your ear, the person telling you to jump, who would it be?
William, it was Rhys Mogg.
Right.
Who now I know as Phineas Fogg, because his golden balloon was actually full of hot air.
Yes.
It's one of those things where he effectively, he's been a voice of reason on many other issues. And I think the big thing that we've been conned into, especially with people like him, is they will be right on 5 issues and wrong on 100. And they'll cling to the right issues that they've got right on. You go, oh yeah, no, maybe he is talking sense. Maybe he is. And then I've been duped. And I feel like the people, especially people like Farage as well, kind of, yeah, he's been waving that flag for a long time. But why I didn't see the sense of the fact that he's been waving that flag while being an MEP? Yeah. Why have I not seen with German children and some of the comments that he's come out with? And I think, actually, how could I? I mean, I wouldn't speak to people at a pub. No. So how have I ended up voting in their direction? I questioned my own sanity of 2 years ago. The only positive I can see that's come out of this is that people were saying we really need to engage young people in politics. Yes. Well, I think they've done that. I think they've done.
Well, they are currently engaged, but of course, depending on what shakes down next, it's hard to know what level that engagement will assume. They could end up feeling utterly dispossessed, of course, if this widespread feeling among young people that they're being led down a very, very dark alley is ignored. Liam, thank you, mate. I appreciate everything you said. Just to clarify, when you used the word drivel, that was not a reference to my book.
Not at all. It was, if anything, that changed. It's helped change my view on how I take in arguments dramatically.
Well, don't forget to buy it for all your Brexit voting relatives for Christmas. 24 minutes after 11 is the time. Oddly enough, one of the things, it's kind of Liam to refer to my book, which I'm very embarrassed to reveal. I think is going to be knocked out of the top 10 in the Sunday Times by Michelle Obama. Who ever thought that day would dawn? But in fact, I know it is going to be knocked out by Michelle Obama and everyone else in the top 10. I remember when I was writing it as one moment that really came back to me, because we thought it was so funny at the time when a caller said something like, Oh, you can prove anything with your facts, James. And we all thought that was really, really funny. Neil's in Sheffield. Neil, what would you like to say?
Following on from your previous callers, really. Another Leave voter that feels, I don't know if guilty is the right word.
Oh.
Not guilty for voting Leave, guilty for believing what these so-called experts, what we were told to listen to. And it's not the Leave voters' fault.
No, it's not.
I'm not going to start crying like Bill, although I do understand what he was saying.
Yes.
It's not. I don't know to blame it on media. Who puts these people on a pedestal where we listen to them and then we believe them, if that makes sense to you.
Of course it makes sense. It's everywhere it happens. It's still happening today. You're still going to see Daniel Hannan popping up in places. You're still going to see Rees-Mogg and Raab and ludicrous people still being treated with respect. So how the hell are you supposed to know that they're complete clowns?
Exactly. They've been given a stage to perform on. Mm-hmm. And then we've all got tickets to the show, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
We shouldn't have even been allowed tickets to that show, because the show that was being shot were just lies. It's fantasy. Complete and utter. It's exactly the same as going to watch a Disney film. It's not real. What they're saying, what they've said to us and what they've sold us, it's not real.
But they're still trying to sell it to you, mate. They're still trying to sell it to you. Dominic Raab's resignation letter describes a much, much better deal without telling you what it is.
No, well, I can guarantee you, I mean, I'm not calling for a second referendum. I can guarantee you, just from my point of view and everybody I know's point of view that voted Leave, if they just asked the Leave voters again what way they'd vote, I guarantee they would lose it. But they're not going to do that, because obviously that's not in their interest. But the number one thing that frustrates me the most is the fact that these people that have given us these lies and sold us this dream, and they're like dodgy. Farage is like a dodgy timeshare salesman. You know what I mean? We all know it's wrong, but people do fall for it. People do buy them timeshares, even though they know it's wrong. People like that, and your radio station as well, like now it's dawning on me, like they're guilty of giving him that platform. It shouldn't be allowed a platform to preach lies. You know what I mean? He can preach his opinion, what we might agree with, what we might not agree with, but the fact is openly told lie. You know what I mean? He's lied to people to get his point across, and things like today and what's happening today and what's happening, it's just a mess. It's horrendous. I can't even put it into words how bad it is.
You're being far too modest, Neil, actually. I thought you've put everything into words quite perfectly.
I was warned before I came on your show not to threaten violence towards Mr Farage, but
you're absolutely right. You know, he can talk about picking up rifles and things like that, but when they go low, Neil...
As you'd know, I feel like wringing his neck, to be quite honest, because I just feel like he's joked and lied to that many people, and him, Gove, Jacob Rees-Mogg, they're all responsible for this, and what they're going to do is what's going to happen is you get people coming on your show calling Leave voters gammon and things. I know you've used it yourself, and I find that quite derogatory, to be honest. And I'm not gammon. I'm not.
No, you're not, mate. Do you know why I know you're not? Because you're capable of changing your mind. That word is used solely. It's just a synonym for bigot. It just describes somebody who will never change their mind, however much evidence is put in front of them. So there's gammon on the far left of the Labour Party, and there's gammon on the far right of the Leave movement.
I'm one of them. I'm 33 now. Like when I was younger, I would have never admit. I'm one of them where if I had an argument, it don't matter what was saying to me, I wouldn't change my view. I just think, and I used to listen to. I've always listened to LBC all the way through, and being absolutely hand on heart, honestly, you were the person that I disagreed with most. Like yours would show that if I could switch over to another state, it'd be yours, because I didn't agree with a word you said. But now, I'm the other way around. I can't stand listening to Nick Ferrari. I won't listen to Nigel Farage. I'd rather listen to Cat Scream for an hour. And that's because over time, it's took a while. It's like it's had to be etched away at me, and it's probably the same with all these people that are ringing you up telling you the same thing. It's took its time, but now we're all seeing like somebody like yourself, your point of view. I'm not putting you up on a pedestal like that.
No, of course you're not. It's not me, is it? Though? It's just the numbers and the facts, mate, rather than the fear and the scaremongering. Yeah,
but that's the point. You're using numbers and facts, and like now I can open like if I had to, I'd tell anybody that what you're saying is right. If anybody said, "Oh, what do you think about Brexit?" I'd say, "Tell you what, listen to James O'Brien 3 hours. Listen to him for a week, and then come back and tell me what you think on Brexit." And if everybody had just listened to you for a few weeks before we got that vote, it would have been completely different.
That's not true. I wish that. Well, yeah, obviously that. I mean, he got far too much oxygen, but it's not true. I wasn't doing this before the referendum. I called it wrong, mate. I was still working at the BBC, and I tried to be impartial, and I will regret it for the rest of my life.
Well, you deserve a pat on back, mate. I'll tell you.
Well, I'll take it from are you a Blade?
I'm a Blade, yeah. I've spoken it before.
I'll take it from you.
I'm a Blade, yeah.
I'll take it from you, Neil. Mind how you go. And this is all for Bill as well, because these are people who've been on the same journey, mate. But they're not going to beat themselves up about it. They're going to blame the people that deserve to be blamed. Do not blame the lied to. Blame the liars. I've got a rather interesting guest coming into the studio shortly. Meghan McCain, the daughter of the late John McCain, a war hero and, of course, prominent Republican politician. She's in town to pick up a posthumous award that I'll be presenting later tonight, so I thought it would be an opportune moment to catch up with her and perhaps discuss a few of the issues facing both of our countries. So don't miss that. It's 11:35. I didn't actually ask for this on the programme today. There was no point, did we say? Give me a call if you've changed your mind. The question very simply was... what do you think about what's going on? And, of course, what's going on is Theresa May, who is currently taking the mother of all monsterings in the House of Commons from her own benches, has done a deal. She's managed to cobble together a deal, having been dealt a hand of cards that had Mr. Loaf the baker, a two of clubs, half a joker that had got jam stuck all over it, one of those Guess Who faces that had been put back in the wrong box, and a tarot card of death. That's what she got dealt by the Brexiters. And she's somehow managed to play a hand. It hasn't gone brilliantly, but it's because of the cards that the Brexiters gave her in June 2016. How have they responded to the fact that she turned out not to have 5 aces, which is what they swore blind she'd end up? Not just 5 aces, they swore she'd have 5 aces of spades, despite playing with a normal 52-card pack. 5 aces of spades that she didn't have. Whose fault is that? Hers. What are they doing? They're still telling you, just deal again, and we'll get 5 aces this time. That's what they're doing. And oddly, and unintentionally, it seems a lot of people kind enough to listen to this programme on a regular basis have heard that penny drop this morning. Probably because of the resignations and the refusal to admit reality. There is nothing better than being in the context of modern, mercantile, economic and political landscapes. There just isn't. It's why Margaret Thatcher invented the single market. But still they bleat about fish and blue passports. Theresa May was put in this position by them. She's made the best of a horrible hand, and now they're beating her up in the House of Commons. These are the people. These are the people who've profited professionally from Brexit, and in many cases I'm 100% confident financially, and a lot of them are still crossing their fingers in the hope of making another killing in the event of us crashing out on terms worse than the ones Theresa May has negotiated. So we probably won't be doing Mystery Hour today. James is in Gran Canaria. James, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James. Thanks for putting me through today. It must have been probably my 5 or 6 attempt at actually getting on your show. And I've actually sort of sold a false profile today as being a leaver who's changed my mind.
You're very busy.
But I thought I'd better try and didn't want to misrepresent myself. I'm one of the probably gammoners, you might say.
Okay, should we move to the point of your call, my friend?
But yes,
because the biography's not going to be that interesting to everybody else.
I don't think you've quite answered this morning how the EU have compromised during this negotiation phase. On any level, I don't think any of the Brexiteers who were making any of these arguments have really, in the Conservative Party manifesto saying leaving the customs union. The only option these days is to actually have a no-deal Brexit, just due to the EU's negotiating stance. I think we've seen Theresa May put in the best of a bad situation and has come out looking rather sorry for herself, and we're just seeing the Brexiteers this morning just saying, well, at the moment, it's looking like a no-deal. I don't think you can just sort of say that the Brexiteers were led down the wrong path. I think it was just a weak negotiation.
No, I didn't. I said they'd led people like you down the wrong path. No. The Brexiters have done the leading.
I don't think I've been led down the wrong path.
Oh, of course you don't. You still believe you can fly.
No, I do.
I know.
And I think that
deep down, you can't.
Well, I think that the parachuter who's holding on to you and you're strapped to him is just let himself go. That's the EU, and you just got to fight for yourself. And it's
so you're literally comparing yourself to a bloke who's jumped out of a plane without a parachute.
Yeah, precisely. That is it.
Well, then we've got no argument. I completely agree with you. That's exactly what you are. What usually happens to people who jump out of planes without parachutes?
Well, if they've been given the right training and they've got the right people behind them.
You think you can jump out of an aeroplane without a parachute, and with the right training you can fly?
I do, yes.
Well, I respect your honesty.
Well, no, I mean, I appreciate your position.
No, mate, I can't. I mean, there's no point me listening to you anymore. You're obviously quite mad. But at least you're honest. I mean, because that's all there is, my friend. You have to admit, yes, I do believe we can fly. But we can't. That's just gravity. Bizarre. Ronnie's in Watford. Ronnie, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. First of all, I've been on the show before, so thanks for the second time.
You're very welcome.
I think the last guy was a bit deluded.
A bit deluded? No, actually, no, I take it all back. It just flew past the studio window and I'm on the 3rd floor.
Oh, great. I'm still kind of in between myself.
Yes, of course.
Because I voted to leave. And there's only one and only reason why I voted to leave. And please don't jump down my throat and call me a racist.
No, I won't.
Because I wouldn't class myself as being racist, because I'd happily let anyone in this country, from any race, creed, or wherever they're from. But for me personally, I work in the construction industry as a lorry driver. And I've seen over the last 10 years that the wages have been driven down by Europeans accepting a lower wage.
Yeah, I mean, the official research doesn't back that up, but I'm prepared to believe you because you seem like a stand-up guy. Are you aware of are you aware of the blacklists in the construction industry?
No.
You're aware of quite a big story that typically only really got reported by The Guardian about the big construction companies essentially blacklisting trades union activists who were trying to organise on building sites to ensure that bosses wouldn't be able to drive wages down to the lowest possible denominator. But the trades union activists got blacklisted and in many cases squeezed out of employment for the rest of their lives. So you have to choose now who you think is more responsible. If you're right about wages falling on the building sites, is it the companies that blacklisted and squeezed out of employment the trades union activists that were trying to raise wages, or is it people, whether they're from Penge, Peterborough or Poland, who had to accept the wage that was offered by the bosses?
I think it's, for me personally, it's had to accept the wages by the bosses because...
So you're blaming the people from Peterborough?
Well, not necessarily.
Well, so the people from Poland who accepted the low wage are culpable, but the people from Peterborough who accepted the low wage are not culpable?
No, I personally have accepted the lower wage because I've had no choice. This is only my only qualification.
And none of them have any choice because that's what the bosses have got, because you're not organised and you're not unionised. So you can't withdraw labour or indulge in collective bargaining.
Yeah.
And they're leaving now. Do you think your wages are going to go up?
Not where I am personally, but this is what I think. I only voted on my personal life.
Yes, but your wages haven't gone down because of immigration. Your wages have gone down because of bosses who have encouraged you and the newspaper owners who have encouraged you to blame immigration. Can I tell you a quick story? Do you mind, or would you feel patronised? I don't want to... There's a story I tell, which I haven't told on the programme very often, but it actually involves the Daily Mail. And the Daily Mail is very much, as we know, under the last editor, a kind of house journal for people like you who understandably believe that your life has been somehow diminished by European Union immigration. And do you know what happened when the cleaners there threatened to go on strike?
I did hear the story, but I can't remember now.
So you've got cleaners at the Daily Mail who were on less than the London living wage, right?
Oh, yes.
Mostly foreign, some from the European Union, some from outside the European Union. They got involved in a trades union, threatened to go on strike, and of course the concomitant publicity that would involve. And they all got a massive pay rise. And guess what? They're still foreign.
No, I understand that.
Good.
And
then we're done.
That, but
then we're done.
The problem is...
Aren't we?
I'm just talking from my personal life, if you like.
I know. And I'm saying to you that you accepting a lower wage as someone from Watford is as relevant to what you get paid as someone from Warsaw doing the same. Don't let them divide and rule you like that, Ronnie.
Maybe you're right.
I am.
Well, see, at my company, they've got about 100 employees, and as you're probably aware, we don't have a union.
No.
So.
Because you're not blaming your bosses for what they pay you. You're blaming your colleagues and your workmates, Ronnie.
Okay.
Aren't you?
You're swaying me, James.
Well, better late than never, mate.
Sorry.
Mind how you go. Theresa May getting predictably monstered in the House of Commons because, of course, the deal that she's put together pleases precisely nobody except the constituency of people who realise that Brexit is arson and were charged with putting out the flames before the whole house has burned down, which she's done. But we've still... half the house is still charred and burned. That's the point. So what the Brexiters continue to do is say, no, more fire, burn it down more, and what the Remainers sit there doing is saying, well, actually, it's not too late to rebuild the whole house and pretend that the fire never happened. And that is pretty much where we are. God, it puts me in mind. Do you remember that Daily Mail front page? I mentioned to Ronnie the Daily Mail. Because of what actually happened in their own offices. You remember that front page? On the momentous day Theresa May said Britain will quit the single market, she put Cameron's feeble negotiations to shame with an ultimatum to Brussels. We'll walk away from a bad deal and make EU pay. Now, I knew on that day that that was not true. I knew that it was deceitful and dishonest and impossible. I didn't know whether the editor of that newspaper was deceitful and dishonest or deluded. I still don't. He's no longer the editor, so it's moot. But the bloke who wrote the story, which appeared under that headline, James Slack, the then political editor of the Daily Mail, has been working at 10 Downing Street pretty much ever since. These are the people who should be weeping tears of guilt, not the people conned into voting for this utterly undeliverable and impossible dream. 11:51 is the time. And just by way of helping you out a bit, and I think I might stop using the word gammon, actually, because it is clear that some people who don't deserve that description feel that they've been tarred with the brush of bacon. And that's a complete misconception of what the word is used to imply. If you are capable of changing your mind, you are by definition not a bigot. And if you are not a bigot, you cannot be described fairly as gammon. But it perhaps makes, even after today's remarkable events, it perhaps makes for an unwelcoming environment. I don't know. I'll hold off on that one. I do rather enjoy it, and we all have to be allowed our schoolboy vices. But that's the astonishing thing about what's happened here. The people who told the lies have all resigned so that they can carry on lying. And Theresa May clearly thought the closer she gets them to power, she replaced Davis with Raab, she thinks the closer they are to the truth, to the power, to the reality, the less likely they are to continue to deny it. And she got that horribly wrong. And she's partly to blame for that, don't forget, because she fed the notion that belief could somehow overcome reality, that you could somehow defy gravity, jump out of an aeroplane without a parachute and fly. Let's have another quick catch-up with Theo. Theo, what's it been like in the House of Commons for Theresa May this morning?
Tough, James. It's been really tough. She's had very little support. What support she has had has come from the Remain side. But before I get on to those comments from the likes of Sir Nicholas Symes and Nicky Morgan, a lot of attention is on members of the European Research Group, the Brexiteers within the party, as they have launched attack after attack on the Prime Minister. And we are now into no confidence vote territory, with Jacob Rees-Mogg sending in his letter today to Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee. His deputy on the ERG is a former defence minister called Marc Francois, who turned his aim on the Prime Minister about half an hour ago.
But the Labour Party have made plain today that they will vote against this deal. The SNP will vote against it. The Liberals will vote against it. The DUP will vote against it. Our key ally in this place will vote against it. Over 80 Tory backbenchers, well, it's 84 now and it's going up by the hour, will vote against it. It is therefore mathematically impossible to get this deal through the House of Commons. The stark reality, Prime Minister, is that it was dead on arrival at St Thomas before you stood up. So I plead with you, to accept the political reality of the situation you now face.
It was then the turn of Jacob Rees-Mogg. You'll hear a shout of "you're a disgrace" in the background. That came from the Remain Conservative MP, Anna Soubry.
As what my right honourable friend says and what my right honourable friend does no longer match,
should I not write to my right honourable friend, the member for Altrincham and Sale West?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend,
the Member of Parliament for Altrincham and Sale West is, of course, Graham Brady, yes. But Theresa May, there's a sort of... Politics is a funny old game, isn't it? Because one of the first people she sacked when she walked into Number 10 2 and a bit years ago, and did it brutally. I mean, it was a sacking, and Nicky Morgan, then Education Secretary, left her parliamentary office in tears, has now turned round and defended her.
There are many ironies in this whole Brexit process, and one of them is we just heard that colleagues on these benches are going to use a parliamentary vote, which 11 of us voted for last December, and received a torrent of abuse, accusations of treachery, betrayal, and threats of deselection. But as we've heard so many times, we are where we are. I want to pay tribute to the fact that the Prime Minister did get agreement in Cabinet. And can she reassure us that regardless of however many ministerial resignations there are between now and that vote, that the agreement will come to Parliament and Parliament will have its say, and that she is clear that voting for that agreement is in the national interest?
Nicky Morgan there. Theo, when is the vote?
It's after November the 25th. So just in terms of the choreography, it's looking increasingly likely now that there is going to be a no-confidence vote in the Prime Minister either tomorrow or Monday, given the numbers that have gone into Sir Graham Brady. Of course, he keeps those numbers very close to his chest, so we can't say anything for certain in that respect. And then we will go through, there'll be the continuation of what has become the Conservative Party psychodrama throughout next week before the summit, which starts at 9:30am on the 25th. And then Theresa May has until Christmas, it's around 5 days of parliamentary time it will require to bring the deal to the House of Commons and to try and get it through.
So it's all up in the air, in brief?
I think it's probably worse than up in the air. I think at the moment...
Don't worry, we had a caller on earlier who can fly.
It's looking as if she's not going to get it through, and she's going to have to, at some stage today, tomorrow, maybe over the weekend or early next week, in the near future, in other words, come up with an alternative.
There is no alternative.
Well, there is an alternative, James. She could call a second referendum.
So you mean, sorry, I thought you meant an alternative deal. You mean an alternative scenario. Theo, thank you, mate. It's 11:57. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And if you're confused about why this is happening, the ERG, if you will, the European Reform Group, the Brexiters, the Brextremists, actually, as I think we should start calling them, because they do not deserve to be put in the same category as people who voted for rational reasons. They have a choice now. They either admit that this is all their fault, or pretending that there is something different and preferable around the corner. That is what it's always been about, but it's now reached critical mass. So you're now looking at a succession of MPs like Jacob Rees-Mogg who would rather knife their own Prime Minister in the front than admit that they've made a terrible mistake. And that, as I've said throughout, is a very human condition. We hate admitting that we're wrong, but it's often the most important thing that we can do. Saves marriages, saves countries, saves friendships, saves every relationship of every kind since the dawn of time. You have to admit when you're wrong, because if you double down on being wrong, eventually everybody suffers. Everybody suffers. And that's now what they're doing. They're looking at the chaos they've created. They created it. They created it by telling you that it was going to be brilliant and beautiful. Now we've seen the reality of what they've created. They have two choices. They deny the reality that they've created and pretend that there's an alternative just within reach, with the right, what did the poor lad say earlier, with the right training and preparation. You can jump out of a plane without a parachute. That's how bad it goes. That's how deep it's run now. People like that ringing a national radio station and ending up claiming that they can fly or somehow survive jumping out of an aeroplane without a parachute. I think I might have taken my analogies too far. But that's what Jacob Rees-Mogg and Dominic Raab and Esther McVeigh and Suella Braverman and all the rest of them, David Davis, probably Johnson, that's where they are now. Either they admit that they've created chaos, or they pretend that they've got a solution. The question that we all have to answer next is, do we believe them? And if you still believe them, just have a look at all the other promises they've made you in the last 3 years. Every single one of those characters has made various promises to you. Just count the ones that have come true and give me a ring. I think something else has become clear today, the abject terror of the so-called people's vote, why they are so terrified of it. And I haven't actually been exposed to the scale of remorse that we've witnessed today before. Maybe some of these clowns in the so-called ERG are better aware than we are of how low they are held in the esteem of people who once believed them. I don't know. I'm probably in danger, just like everybody else is, of hearing what I want to hear. No mystery out today, if you're wondering, given that we are in, first-level constitutional crisis, which we voted for. First country in history to vote to put economic sanctions on itself and to cause a constitutional crisis, all in the name of unity and stability. Chaos. That's what Ed Miliband was going to deliver in the 2015 election, you remember? David Cameron called a referendum in order to unite the Conservative Party. More calls, please. Chris is in Shaftesbury. Chris, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. How are you?
Well, I'm all right. It's all a bit surreal, isn't it, to be honest?
Yeah, it is. It's extraordinary, frankly. I was quite touched by Bill's call.
Yes.
Really touched. And if I may, I'm actually a part of a group on Twitter called Remainer Now.
Okay.
I wanted to ring up really just to say to Bill and people like him, look, you're not alone. There's 13,000 of us that are on this particular group, all of which voted leave, all of which have changed our minds. Gosh. We've sort of seen through it and gone, what have we done? And the reason why I wanted to put it to you today, James, is because if there's more people coming out of the woodwork now, it gives us a real opportunity to say, look, there are a lot of us who have changed our minds.
I hear you. I'm not ordinarily comfortable with people promoting their Twitter groups on air, but I know that's not what you're doing. No, don't worry. Don't worry. You don't have to apologise. Because I think you've rung in to put an arm around Bill's shoulders and tell him that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people like him. Yeah, well, that's an act of decency, mate.
Yeah, and we, our group ourselves, if you don't mind me saying, we actually went to the Commons a few weeks ago. We were invited.
Okay.
By MPs such as Stephen Doty, Ben Bradshaw, Paul Williams, Rosie Duffield, Dominic Grieve. They're all there, and they wanted to hear our stories and why we voted Brexit and why we changed our minds. So there are MPs out there that are really listening to us.
It's a weird one, isn't it, with the way the media covers it? Because presumably you've struggled to get arrested.
Well, yeah, precisely. I mean,
you've been written out of history in a way, because even today she's talking about delivering what the British people voted for, and she's actually delivering. I don't think any of the 51.9% voted for what she's done.
Well, exactly this, and she keeps banging on about the people have spoken. Well, I'm sorry, but we are the people, and we are still speaking, and there is a lot to be said. It's not over.
I understand some of the things she's done over the course of the last 2 years, I felt she had little choice to do. But what's clear now, and 2020 hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? But it was always a postponement of today. Everything was always a postponement of today. So triggering Article 50 early just kept the Brextremists at bay and the editor of the Daily Mail happy, using phrases like Brexit means Brexit, pledging to leave the customs union and the single market, which is madness on every level. But it kept
Boris Johnson said that would be madness. Only a madman would say.
I think that was Owen Patterson, wasn't it? Daniel Hannan said something similar as well. No, that's all right. I know far too much about this stuff than anyone should. But that was a postponement, you see, always a postponement. And that was the only thing that made sense. What the hell does Brexit mean? What the hell does the will of the people mean? What the hell does you have to believe in it mean? All of these ludicrous slogans were designed to postpone this moment in the hope, I believe, that when this moment came, people high up in the government and people on the Brexit side of the referendum would do what you and 13,000 other people on your Twitter account had done and actually recognise you voted for something that was impossible.
Exactly. And the will of the people, that phrase on its own, is 2 years out of date, James. And the only way Theresa May is going to make any kind of is going to turn this around in any way, shape or form is to put it to a people's vote. There is no
but I'm with you on that. I think an informed consent is my preferred phrase, but I'm probably less optimistic than you are, and that might be because I get exposed to people like the fellow earlier who thinks he can fly, rather more than anybody else perhaps in the British media does. But I just see them. Look, these are not half-wits. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg went to the best school in the country, and he still can't get his head around this, unless, of course, he is quite deliberately and quite cynically misleading the British people in order to somehow profit either professionally or financially himself, and that's something that can't be ruled out. But these people resigning, insisting that there's still cake tomorrow, there's still unicorns for everyone, there's still sunny uplands on the horizon, they don't have any excuses. No one's led them by the nose, no one's misled them, no one's lied to them. They've chosen now to continue to deny reality in preference to admitting a mistake. And there's going to be a lot of them out there, mate. A lot of them.
Yeah, can I just finish by thanking you?
Oh, all right, yes.
Just because I know that a lot of the guys that I've been speaking to, some of us that went to Parliament a couple of weeks ago on the 24th of October, I mean, a lot of us listen to you, James.
Good.
I'm not blowing smoke, as the phrase goes. But, what you're doing is really making a difference and changing a lot of minds. So, from me and everyone else.
Well, you're very kind. You're very kind. But I am sadly nowhere near as perhaps important as you're kind enough to believe. Or, of course, nowhere near as important as some of the people still embedded on the other side of the argument apparently believe I am. But the clips have changed the way this job works. Those clips have landed on Facebook pages of people who've never heard of me and still don't know who I am, but they have heard for the first time, for example, that the European Union rules regarding immigration are actually quite robust. We just chose not to impose them. They have had, perhaps for the very first time, someone in their ear explaining that actually 30 years of being told these people are somehow our enemies is built on nothing. And that for me is the big switch. If you are like Ronnie earlier, wavering, feeling that actually, yes, I am capable of admitting I've been sold a pup, but I'm not quite there yet. I think the most important thing you can do is just think of the European Union as neutral for a minute. Don't even start thinking about it as a positive. Just think of it as neutral and ask yourself, why did I believe it was somehow acting against my interests? Why did I believe that? And if you've got a story, Google it, see if it's true. If you've got a fact, what you think is a fact in your mind, the reason I hate the European Union is ... Google that. And eventually, there won't be much left. You might be able to claim that you are voting to leave the European Union as a response to high youth unemployment in Greece. You mean by all means, there is high youth unemployment in Greece. And the measures that Greece was forced to undergo in order to remain economically viable on the world stage have contributed to that unemployment level. But ask yourself why you would be voting to leave the biggest single market in the world because there are some unemployed 20-somethings in Thessaloniki. Just ask yourself why. Always why. But start off by just pretending, if you can, or positing the notion in your mind that the EU is a neutral entity. Almost like a bureaucracy that is in charge of making sure that everything runs smoothly. Set aside the other stuff, I don't understand why anyone should be frightened of an army that we're in, for example, but just park all of the stuff that still manages to light blue touch paper and just look at the world through lenses that render the European Union as a neutral entity. And then look at these headbangers and ask yourself what the hell they're talking about. And they're still talking about it. Richard is in Tiverton. Richard, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello.
You're still too nice, mate.
Well,
You're still too nice.
That is a very controversial position that you adopt. There are plenty of people who would disagree most passionately with you, Richard.
Well, come on in, James. Let's talk about farming, right?
Yes.
A lot of farmers hate the EU because they say that all the regulations stop them making money and it's all terrible.
Yes.
And that's why they went along and believed that all the red tape would be snipped off them and off they'd fly.
Yes.
So
despite warnings from the NFU, actually, that they were perhaps being a little overly optimistic.
Yes, just a bit, as more than 50% of British farming businesses will go bust.
Do you really think so?
If there's no deal. Well, it's not my opinion, James. It is authoritative economists.
Patrick Minford.
More than 50% of all farm income north of the border, Northern Ireland, Wales, and most of the upland areas of Britain.
This is the astonishing thing. This is why you are perhaps onto something when you suggest that I should be angrier than I am or less kind than I am, because Patrick Minford is still the economist that they all cite. Rees-Mogg, I don't think, has got anybody else in his pocket. They pull out this ludicrous individual who has said himself that we will somehow be economically better off after Brexit, but industry and farming will cease to exist. And he's their go-to economist.
That's right. Now, would you like to hear what the gammon farmers are saying today?
Yeah, go on, you cheeky man. Go on.
Right. The gammon farmers say, there are too many people in farming anyway. We could do with a big clear-up.
Are you serious? That's...
People.
Crikey.
Yeah, that's what we want. We want a big clear-out, and then we'll have a Brexit, and then us that can make money will be still here, and all the rest of them be out here.
So they're not contemplating the possibility that one of the farms that closes as a result of Brexit could be theirs?
I think you probably hit the nail on the head there.
That's Brexit in a nutshell, isn't it? It's going to hurt people. Yes, it might hurt you. No, it won't, because of the wonderful things she does.
That's right. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Rees-Mogg.
All right, let's stop now. I think we're on for chat. Any light at the end of the tunnel, Richard?
It's a gorilla with a flashlight, James, and you know it, and I know it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I do think the likelihood of having to go back to the country is probably greater now than it has been at any point since Theresa May went to the country. But I don't know, of course, what result we would get. And this programme, uplifting though it has been in many ways and heartbreaking in others, is a tiny corner of the country, not necessarily representative of any broader shifts. And for the avoidance of doubt, Richard is a farmer himself in Devon. He's phoned me a few times before, so before you start accusing him of farmism or farmerism, he is one of that number. I'm going to introduce you to Meghan McCain after the break. You may have seen her on ABC, where she co-hosts the political discussion show The View, and she is, of course, also the daughter of the late Republican politician and proper war hero, Senator John McCain. She's here in London to pick up an award that I will have the privilege of presenting to her posthumously for her father, and she's kindly popped into the studio for a quick chat after this. We'll take a brief 10-minute or so interlude from the bonkersness of Brexit, because I want to remind you of something that, oddly enough, happened on this programme a few years ago when we were talking with a degree of ignorance isn't perhaps the right word, but confusion about events in Ukraine and Russia and elsewhere. My producer took a call from a chap called Bill Browder, who tuned in by accident while sitting in the back of a taxi, and offered to come in and give us chapter and verse on what he was up to. And I don't know why, because we get a lot of offers like that, but oddly enough, we accepted his invitation, and everything he told us that day has been slowly coming true ever since, culminating, of course, in the so-called Magnitsky Acts, which have been brought in various countries to prevent the kleptocrats in the Kremlin and their cronies from washing their money in ostensibly civilized countries. One of the politicians who did the most to help Bill on his mission, indeed, Bill Browder wrote in The Economist last year, "I have two heroes in the world, Sergei Magnitsky and this American politician that I'm about to tell you, have done more to curtail the kleptocracy's clutches on Western civilization than any other." And that politician is the late Republican senator and war hero John McCain, whose daughter Meghan is a well-known face on American television and recognisable here as well after appearances on The View at ABC. And I hope you'll allow me to say, Meghan, after delivering a eulogy for your father, that must have been an incredibly bittersweet moment for you, because you recognised the esteem, the affection in which he was held, but also, of course, you were saying goodbye to him yourself as a daughter.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean, it's the worst day of my life when he died, and giving the eulogy, when he had the kind of cancer he had, he knew he was dying, and we all knew he was dying because glioblastoma, the brain cancer he had, the lifespan averages around 14 months, which is exactly how long he survived. And yeah, I mean, at the moment I knew that I had to do it, but I prepared really hard and I wrote it. I actually read it to him before he died. And it's the worst moment of my life having to do it, but I'm glad that so many people came out, and the overwhelming support in the United States that I saw was unbelievable, and the warmth and the love and affection towards my father, it's quite a way to say goodbye.
Yes, I can imagine it is, actually. When he first became aware of Bill Browder and the Magnitsky sanctions, I presume as a senator he would have stuff crossing his desk every day. He'd have people bending his ear wherever he went. He'd have people claiming that the cause that they supported was the most important cause on the planet. Do you know why he settled upon the Magnitsky Act as something that he was going to dedicate so much time and energy to?
Well, my father understood what was happening in Russia and with Vladimir Putin even before anything that had happened with Sergei. I can remember when he was running for president in 2008, one of his main talking points on the campaign trail was saying that President Bush looked in the eyes of Vladimir Putin and he saw a soul. And my dad said, when I look in the eyes of Vladimir Putin, I see a K, a G, and a B, and he's not to be trusted. And it was always an applause line. And for some reason, since that point in time, which is 2007, and now we're here in almost 2019, globally, the impression of Vladimir Putin and his, in my opinion, murderous KGB regime has shifted. And I think when he met Bill Browder and heard the story of Sergei Magnitsky, I think you can't help but be moved when you hear about it and be impacted. I mean, he was literally tortured for trying to go up against and exposing, the deep and intense, the money laundering and all the hypocrisy that was going on between Russia and the United States. And I think Bill Browder is a very convincing man, and he's a great spokesperson for it. But I remember when my dad met with him because he talked to me about it soon after.
It was an astonishing meeting, because I know Bill well, and indeed we will be together at a secret location in London later tonight when I present your father's posthumous award to you and to a number of other unspeakably brave individuals or indeed their representatives on the stage, because they'll be unable to join us. And I know that when he was in America on that trip shortly after Sergei was murdered in prison in 2009, he'd pretty much run into a brick wall. He'd failed to get much traction at all in either the media or the political establishment. And then he met your dad, spring of 2010, a 15-minute meeting at the door of his office in the Russell Senate office building in D.C. And everything changed.
And I think they had an hour and a half meeting. It ended up being...
it did. It was extended.
Yeah, my father talked about Boris Nemtsov a lot as well, and I think it's weird for me to be here, and it's bittersweet, like you said, because obviously I would prefer him to be here accepting this award, but yes. I watched Boris Nemtsov's daughter's acceptance last year online, and it's obviously you can't compare. I mean, her father was slaughtered for his political beliefs, but it's sad that it seems to take death for people to realize just how extreme everything is, and just the way that I feel the extreme imminence of what's happening in Russia and how soon it has and will continue, in my belief, coming to the United States and to Britain.
Yes, well, it is, for the record, my belief as well, and largely, I imagine, as a result of consulting similar sources. But what's odd, of course, is that the Magnitsky Act has progressed, and it's been introduced in various countries, but simultaneously, you could argue that Putin's attempt to destabilise and undermine Western liberal democracies like both of ours, you're American, I'm British, that's actually been proving quite successful, while at the same time the attempts to stop him from hanging on to his ill-gotten gains have moved on apace. It's an odd contradiction there.
The gaslighting of the American public, I think, has been very effective by Russian bots and Russian agents. I think they did it very effectively during the election. For me, when I found out that President Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., met with a Russian agent who was petitioning to get the Magnitsky Act removed, claiming it had something to do with adoption. It is something that I know, and I think you probably know as well, it is something that Vladimir Putin hates. I think he's very threatened by it, obviously, because it directly, instead of just sanctioning his country, is, as you said, sanctioning individuals who propose a deep and imminent threat.
So he can't sell it as anti-Russian, can he?
Yes.
He can only sell it as anti-him and his cronies.
Yes, that's the only way to, I guess, propagandize it in that way. But it's hard. It's really hard. I grew up always believing that, Vladimir Putin was an imminent threat. And I can remember when my father went to the Ukraine to support the protesters, against Putin and against his expansion into Kiev. he was so deeply moved by it. And if you see the videos of it, there's crowds screaming, McCain, McCain, McCain. And it's interesting, especially people from the Ukraine come up to me a lot in New York City to talk about my dad. And it just makes me very fearful that, I don't know, it feels like he was the only one really fighting against it. And I think at this specific moment in time when it seems like Putin really is expanding in a way that's very aggressive and very effective, it makes me very fearful.
Yes, and fearful is probably a bit of an understatement, actually, because we're talking about Brexit in this country endlessly at the moment, and there is a fairly wide spread belief now that there was sort of interference and certainly propaganda perpetrated.
In Brexit as well?
Yeah, in Russia, seeking to get us to vote against our national interest because instability in Europe will only help him hang on to power in Russia. But presumably, even after all this time, you still look at the current incumbent in the White House with a sense of disbelief or skepticism?
I don't love when Americans, and I had a problem when President Obama would go overseas and say negative things about President Bush. So all I know is that the number one issue for me is this issue. It is the fact that, Putin would love nothing more than absolute chaos in the West and absolute destruction in the United States, and us to sort of normalize, a man who murders people who come out publicly against him, like Boris Nemtsov did. And I look at cable news sometimes, and I've worked in cable news, and I see some of the things that look very propagandistic and in favor of Vladimir Putin. And I don't understand how this gaslighting has happened in such a short period of time.
Because it's commercially popular, isn't it? I mean, literally people
much
like
more
buying
than I would have expected.
Well, the same here. I mean, I've possibly been exposed to it for a little longer than you have, and it never ceases to amaze me with the alacrity with which people buy into stuff that is designed to terrorise and frighten them, but isn't true. I mean, there are people in your country who routinely email and text me telling me that there are parts of this city that I'm not allowed to go to because of Sharia patrols and Islamic violence. And, of course, we learned last week that the majority, the biggest issue which the Russian trolls and bots have been tweeting Britain and British accounts about was precisely this. So people who've never left Texas think that you can't walk out of this studio safely in 5 minutes' time.
Around all outside to get in here.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? And that is the surprising thing, the willingness to believe it, rather than what we'd have thought would be a healthy skepticism.
It's the cyber terrorism as well that's working really well as well, at least that I believe. The strange part for me is I grew up obviously conservative and in a conservative family, and one of the main tenets is that America is a shining city on top of a hill, as President Reagan said, and we've somehow morphed from that to, well, it's not our problem. What's happening over there will stay over there. And I think for me, that's one of the most disheartening elements of what's going on in my country right now, is that we seem to sort of have a lacking of empathy for the little guys.
And it's being stoked up, and your father very much represented the opposite of that world.
Yes, and I'm very proud he did. Yes.
I'm sure you are. I look forward to seeing you later, Megan.
Thank you. I'm very nervous.
Don't be. I'm on the stage.
First international speech.
I'm on the stage, you realise, so I shall be happy to mop your brow, and I certainly won't be doing that.
And thank you for all the work you're doing, too. I mean, it feels very isolating sometimes, too. I think feel the way that both of us feel during a time when seems to be unpopular.
Yes, but not necessarily wrong.
But on the right side of history and justice.
Well, that's the silver lining. Meghan McCabe, thank you very much indeed. And the country is arguably more divided than ever before, with the divisions simply moving slightly in one way or the other. The deal that Theresa May has successfully negotiated with the European Union has delighted precisely nobody. Because on the one hand, there are people who have contended all along that there is no deal better than the terms of membership negotiated chiefly by Margaret Thatcher and John Major. And on the other hand, there are the people who genuinely believed that they were going to be invited to join a brave new dawn. Oddly and unintentionally, the programme has focused quite heavily on people in the latter category who have perhaps realised that brave new dawn was never going to happen. But before anybody gets too optimistic, don't get too dismissive either of plenty of people who will still believe that either a brave new dawn is possible, because why wouldn't you believe people like Dominic Raab? He was a Secretary of State until 10 minutes ago. You know, these people aren't just ranting loonies on the top deck of the bus. They're holders of the greatest officers in the country in the case of Boris Johnson. The idea, this is a really important point, I think, to make. There is nothing weird or wrong in looking at people in positions of such power and status and thinking to yourself, well, if it's all right with them, it must be fine. Most of us haven't got the time or the energy to sift through the details and the facts. I'm not being patronising now. I'm really not. Because whatever you do for a living, I would be rubbish at. It's my job to sift through. So what I do find odd is the people who have ended up conning half the country and in many cases will continue to claim that you could actually fly if you only believed a little bit more. Because I don't know anymore what motivates them. I've never really bought into the notion of actual investments in the markets and hoping that the pound will move, although some prominent Brexit backers did make a killing on the night of the referendum. I think if I was going to buy into a conspiracy theory, it would be more of flavoured by those 9 entities that we learnt about last week when Shamir Sani won his... Actually, it was earlier this week, wasn't it? God, there's a lot of politics around at the moment. You remember that Shamir Sani successfully argued that 9 entities, including the so-called Taxpayers Alliance, and Leave means leave, even the personal office of the former UKIP leader Peter Whittle, 9 separate entities that had all worked together to smear him as a punishment for, to quote the court papers, a belief, a philosophical belief in the sanctity of democracy. And you ask what those people want, what do all those weirdos want? And they want a world in which politics is not allowed to influence business. That's why they like chlorinated chicken. That's why they like coffee with 39 teaspoons of sugar in it. That's why they like fixed odds betting terminals. It's why they don't like things like smoking bans or alcohol taxes. They think that the wealthy person's prerogative to make as much profit as possible from punters like you and me should be utterly and completely unregulated and untrammelled. And you'll remember, of course, that phrase bonfire of the regulations that has been used in many contexts to justify leaving the European Union. Because there are protections in place as a result of membership that member state governments are free to exceed. So we actually have better laws in place than the European Union requires in many areas, but it's like a bottom. You cannot go below that level. You can do various different things to a chicken before putting it on the market in the European Union, but you can't wash it in chlorine. Do you see? So you can have organic, free range, you've still got battery chicken, so there's lots of different things you can do to a chicken, but what the European Union laws ensure is that there are levels below which no member state is allowed to fall, and that's what they hate. They hate the idea that they can't make a few quid out of chlorinated chicken. Richard's in Kilburn. Sorry, Richard. I'll steer us back onto the path of this morning's conversations. What would you like to say?
Oh, well, I think you've kind of just made the point that I was going to make. That, earlier on you said that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg might be regretting and walking away with their tail between their legs and hiding and all that. But I actually think
No, I don't. I may have said that. I didn't mean to.
I inferred from what you said that there was shame in the fact that what they were doing was going wrong. But I have a feeling that the extreme right people like Farage and Jacob Rees-Mogg actually want to crash out because the funny outcomes that they talk about are those of the free market, as they call it. Liam Fox being the absolute kind of epitomization of all of that.
Yes. And it is a philosophical belief that politics has no business curtailing profiteering.
Exactly.
Do you think they're closer or further from their prize today? Do you think that constituency of politician is nearer or further away from the prize that they have in mind?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think they're further away, and I think those people who have convinced people who are not as educated, perhaps, or people who are not as experienced politically, that they're on their side. And I think it's the scales are starting to fall from people's eyes.
Yes, but there'll still be an awful lot of scales there, won't there? And I don't think anyone can start cracking open champagne bottles or anything like that just yet.
I think there's always going to be a tribalism in it, but I do think there's a lot of very sincere people believed what they said, and they believe that people like Nigel Farage represents them, and they believe that Jacob Rees-Mogg is on their side, where in fact they would be the first people to ditch rights for workers and
yes, of course they would. There's a few quid in it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much how it goes. What do you think is going to happen next?
I'm cautiously optimistic.
No, I know you are, but I want to know what you think is going to happen next.
Well, I think what's going to happen eventually, it will either be they'll go to the country and there'll be an election, or I think there will have to be a second vote. And I think this time we'll end up remaining. I think one way or the other we will remain anyway, because it's impossible with Northern Ireland, as you have been saying for about the last 5 years.
Well, not quite that long, but it feels like it sometimes.
It does feel like it. Yeah, I mean, I think the actual logistics of it are so impossible that I think it'll either get kicked into the long grass and just never happen, or we will end up remaining by consensus.
Well, we shall see. Something's going to have to shake down. But, of course, your cautious optimism notwithstanding, we've just been in the company of former, very prominent Republican commentator from America, somebody with whom I wouldn't ordinarily chime politically, but she reminds us that in America they essentially, their democracy has delivered a fascist. So your cautious optimism is tempered by my perhaps unnecessary cynicism. It's 12:42. Lee is in Brentwood. Lee, what would you like to say?
I voted Brexit, perhaps idealistically. If idealistically I was asked to vote again tomorrow, I would continue to vote Brexit.
Yes.
Despite all of the bias, I would say, that I've heard on the programme today, I liken it to taking a job whilst employed on a lower wage in the hope and expectation that I will earn more in the future. You're buying into an optimism that you've got the ability to change your own future. The problem we've got is that we joined a common market in the 70s. Year by year, decade by decade, the powers of Europe increased over this country more and more and more, to the extent that there was almost political union, monetary union. Even now we're looking at sort of military union as well. That's not what most people in this country, I believe, want to see. Now, what you're doing is dressing it up in a black and white scenario, no deal or a deal. The reality is quite simple. The deal that's been presented has been negotiated by Euro Remainers in the civil service, backed by a Prime Minister who, to all intents and purposes, we're led to believe has been a Remainer and stuff.
Let me pause you there, because you obviously, I'm familiar with everything you've just said. Why do you think, if there was something better for Britain available, why do you think the Prime Minister wouldn't want it?
Well, you see, when you go into a negotiating strategy, the other side have to believe that you're prepared to go to the extreme to get what you want.
Well, they did. That's why no deal has been on the table. But the question wasn't that, mate. The question very simply is, if there's something better available, why do you think the Prime Minister actively doesn't want it?
Why do I think the Prime Minister actively doesn't want it? I think that the Prime Minister is trying to bring together a lot of different people that's going to be impossible to do.
Yes, I do. No, I think that as well. But we're looking at your suggestion that because they were somehow Remainers and the negotiations have been conducted by people who didn't want to leave, then that's why it's all gone badly, which I understand you have to cling to that belief, because the alternative
Well, it's not a case of clinging. It's
all right, you just have to hold on. You have to hold on to that belief. But the question that I really want you to... Lee, you can talk as much as you want, but I'm just going to ask you the question again until you answer it.
James, touché. The point is
so
that
why, if there is something better available, in your mind, just you as an individual voter, in your mind, why would the Prime Minister actively not want this thing that exists that's better than what she's got?
Well, arguably, that's the million-dollar question, and that's why most of the party's now turning against her.
Yeah, so what's your answer to it, then?
I can't answer that, can I?
But you told me it was true. You told me that she categorically didn't want this thing that was better than what she's got.
I didn't say categorically, James. I think you should listen to what I actually said. What I said was that she was, in the eyes of what we've been led to believe, she was always a Remainer.
Yes.
That's
now,
what
here's my question.
Press, right?
So, in your mind, you must have an answer to this, otherwise you wouldn't have rung in. Why do you think she doesn't want that thing that's better than what she's got?
Well, let me correct you there. The reason I rung in is in the interest of balance, because ultimately the accusations that you fly around left, right and centre about everybody that voted Brexit as gammon is patently untrue.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not in the position...
I mean, the definition of gammon is someone who won't change their mind, however much their evidence is. Lee, I'm going to keep asking you the question until either you say you can't answer it or you answer it. So there is something better than what she's got, but she's decided that she doesn't want it. Why do you think she's done that, mate?
James, am I party to all of the negotiations that take place? Do I know all of the facts? No, I run a business myself.
Yes, that's why I said think. That's why I said think, not no, just think. Why do you think?
Please don't be patronising, James.
Why do you think
you're
she's done it?
You're an intelligent man, but you don't need to behave that way.
Oh, here we go. So you're not going to answer the question because you can't, and now you're just going to embarrass yourself by fluttering on the radio.
I'm not fluttering at all.
No.
Actually, not at all.
No, it's all going brilliantly. So now we'll answer the question.
It's like a playground now, isn't it? You're
Come
just
on,
talking
mate.
over me constantly.
Why has she chosen not to do this thing that's better? Just any explanation that bears...
What she has tried to do is cobble together an agreement to try to bridge massive divides across the whole political spectrum. And it was never going to work because
I agree with
ultimately her position is from... We remain as much in the status quo as we possibly can because of the 40 years encroachment the EU has made on this country.
Yeah, no, you can't just repeat yourself because here's the thing.
But it's a fact, though, isn't it?
Lee, it's
a fact.
No, well, okay, it's a fact. So suddenly you know stuff.
No,
I'm just asking you to explain your own reasoning.
For an intelligent person,
we're doing it again.
People the way that you
I'm not insulting you. You've insulted me.
No, I haven't at all.
Have you called me patronising? I'm telling teacher. So let's try again, okay? Last chance. Here is the thing that's much better than what she's got. She's decided not to go down that road. Can you just tell me why you think she's made that decision? That's
I would rather be going down than no deal, be prepared to walk away, not pay them the, whatever it is, 40 billion that we have, than put together a deal that is clearly not in our public interest. Now, why would you do that? I don't know.
Right, okay.
That's the honest answer. I don't know.
I do.
Go on, then.
That thing that you think is better than what she's done, it doesn't exist, Lee. It's 12:48. So there must be something better than this deal that Theresa May has brought back from Brussels. But I can't tell you what it is. I have no idea what it looks like, and neither can I explain to you why she has chosen not to adopt it. Now, don't pile in on some fella from Brentwood for just reflecting what Dominic Raab has done today when resigning as Secretary of State for delivering Brexit. There is something better than this, but I don't know what it is, I can't tell you what it is, and I have no idea why Theresa May didn't choose to do that thing instead. Okay? Now, Lee gets off because he can say, it's not my job to know. I've got a really strong opinion. I don't need to back it up. But when the Secretary of State for leaving the European Union does the same thing, then actually it is his job to back it up with facts and understanding. And there's only one reason why this happens, and it's taken a while for this to fully form in my mind, but once it had done, it's crystal clear why it happened. A caller like the last one, complaining about increasing union or increasing control, if you want to call it that, just swap the words around, okay? So these people are our friends. We are together in a huge and imperfect club. The more closely we work together, the more of those imperfections will be ironed out and removed. So what you end up seeing then is someone who is standing on a platform or standing in a television studio saying, they control us and they're trying to take over and there's too much unity. What they're actually saying is there's too much friendship. There's too much cooperation. There's too much reflection of collective interests, which to people like me sounds utterly bonkers. How can you have too much cooperation in pursuit of collective interests? How can you have too much unity? How can you have too much cooperation? But what these extremists have done, in some cases, in most cases, they've done it to very decent people. They've redefined the words. So that instead of cooperation, we have control. And the only way you make that work is if you... And you don't have to start off from this position. I do believe you can get pushed into it. You have to see them as an enemy. That's the only way it works. That's why the post-Second World War rhetoric works so well. Who needs an Airbus? We've got Spitfires. You know, that's the only way it works. You have to cast them as an enemy. And that's quite a peculiarly British thing. The notion of other European countries being our historical enemies. It was France that Germany invaded. They've managed to see that the future, if it is to be brighter, must involve harmony and union, cooperation. But we're still sitting here thinking we can be better off by not being harmonious with our neighbours, by not cooperating, by not acting collectively in pursuit of a common good. So if you can just change it's almost like changing the focus on a lens, isn't it? And instead of seeing, and that's why all of those lies about everything from bananas through to sex toys that we ran through yesterday, all published in British newspapers over a period of 30 years, have groomed the British public into believing that this organisation, this club, of which we are an intrinsic, valued and valuable member, awful lot of this legislation was written by us. Oh, damn the EU for making us follow laws that we helped write. Do you see how mad it is? And that's how you end up in a place where you will insist that you've got a very, very strong opinion and get offended if you're asked to explain it. That's how it happens. It works. Leads all the way to the White House. Aisling is in Croydon. Aisling, what would you like to say?
Hi, love the show. Haven't been on before. I kind of I'm ringing up in just response to something that you said earlier on in the show, which was about how you shouldn't blame the people who voted for it and changed their mind.
Yeah.
As someone, I'm you know, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from here.
Sure.
So I moved over here when I was 18, and obviously this all came about 2 years ago, so I've been in the country for 6 years.
Yes.
And what I found quite interesting was when I was talking to people, normally, you know, people from the UK, not fellow Europeans, but from the UK, they had this specific idea of what things were coming out. And I have to admit, a lot of that has to do with the media.
Yes.
So I understand that, of course, people are going to be led down a garden path, but that's only if you chose to. And the thing that I think is quite important is there is a personal responsibility. Yes, you can say sorry if your vote that you've changed now your idea of Brexit. But what you have to do is you have to turn around and go, why did I believe that in the first place? Now, you may say the media that we have out there in the UK is quite hard, but look at 3 days ago, you were quoting Fintan O'Toole from the Irish Times. Yes. It's not like you have to learn French or German to go and get a different view.
No, but most people don't even read an English newspaper. They just see the disseminated clips from Facebook of stories that aren't true without any leavening influences, you know? And most people can't be bothered. I mean, why would you? That's what politicians are for. We trust them not to actually lead us into oblivion and chaos.
Well, is that exactly what a politician is supposed to do? A politician is going to stand up for one small cohort of the country. So therefore, you're going to want to look at what they're representing, because the views of Croydon are probably going to be very different to the Outer Hebrides in Scotland.
Well, even break it down differently on Leave, can't you? Because you had conflicting promises being made by people on the same side, which would actually cancel each other out. If one of those promises was somehow kept, it would make the other promise made by someone else on the same team absolutely impossible to keep. So you're saying you have less charitable thoughts towards these people than I do because they should have seen what was happening.
Well, no, it's not that they should have seen what's happening, because as you said, especially with Facebook and all these things, you're in your own bubble. But if you really strongly thought about it, and I think a lot of people these days have, because you have to know yourself. There's a personal responsibility to try and find out the truth.
Yeah, but if you don't know why... But listen, you've heard callers to this programme before. They don't know why they feel the way that they do. And they get so cross when you ask them why they've ended up thinking what they think, because they feel somewhere inside that the European Union is our enemy, that it wishes us harm, that it will do us ill. And growing up in Ireland, I don't think you've ever seen that.
No, I haven't. And I was actually going to say that is something that as you said, it is a very British thing. And I do think it is very British, because I have many good friends who live in Paris. I was quite lucky to go to Germany to learn German. So I have quite a lot of European friends. And it is something that is very particular to the UK. However, I've got a lot of Greek friends who are a bit different now.
Well, of course they are, because of things that were actually done by the European Union after Goldman Sachs helped Greece sneak in when it shouldn't really have been able to. But that's the point. It's the enemy. Once you just park that, even Lee in Brentwood, just park for 10 minutes if you can, the idea that the EU is your enemy, that it wishes you harm. Swap the word control for cooperation, swap the word political union for the word unity, and just say, what's wrong with more friendship, more unity, more cooperation, more collective action in pursuit of a common good? And then you'll be even more depressed than you are now.